A concretização do Pacto Ecológico Europeu e, em particular, o objetivo de tornar a Europa no primeiro continente climaticamente neutro exige uma transformação profunda do sistema energético europeu. Para esse efeito, a presidência portuguesa do Conselho da União Europeia estabeleceu 7 prioridades que irão traçar o caminho desta transformação energética. A primeira é, desde logo, reconhecer que é necessário desenvolver um mercado interno energético eficaz, coeso e competitivo, com um elevado nível de proteção do consumidor, acesso equitativo e aumento da capacidade de produção. O segundo é assegurar a promoção da eficiência energética em todos os setores, sendo esta uma opção basilar para a concretização dos objetivos europeus, em linha com o Acordo de Paris, bem como uma das formas mais eficazes e justas de assegurar a transição para uma economia neutra em carbono. O terceiro, e neste quadro, é que é incontornável maximizar o potencial das renováveis e de um sistema energético descentralizado através do fomento do autoconsumo e das comunidades energéticas. Em quarto lugar, encorajar o debate em torno do hidrogênio verde e dos mecanismos de apoio para a criação de um verdadeiro mercado para este hidrogênio. Em quinto, concretizar a vaga de renovação, que pode ter um papel crucial na recuperação da economia, apoiando a reabilitação de edifícios, contribuindo para a melhoria da eficiência energética, apoiando a economia circular e promovendo o bem-estar e a inclusão social, combatendo, por fim, a pobreza energética. Em sexto, a criação de condições para o armazenamento, as smart grids e as interligações, que são essenciais para sustentar o crescimento do mercado energético e permitir a melhor integração e o crescimento das fontes de energia renovável. Por fim, em sétimo, promover as relações externas e a diplomacia energética com os nossos principais parceiros, bem como organizações e iniciativas internacionais. Relativamente aos objetivos na área de energia, é a nossa ambição a obtenção de uma abordagem geral do Conselho na revisão do regulamento das redes transeuropeias de energia, fundamental para assegurar que a Europa atinja o objetivo da neutralidade climática. Assumimos igualmente como prioridade promover o debate e assegurar a adoção de conclusões do Conselho sobre a vaga da renovação. Pretendemos ainda manter o hidrogênio na ordem do dia, com troca de pontos de vista no Conselho de Energia em junho. A presidência nesta área conta ainda com 2 eventos de alto nível. A Conferência sobre o Hidrogênio e a Conferência sobre Green Mining, a realizar esta segunda no dia 5 de maio, ambas voltadas para a criação de soluções que visam contribuir para os grandes desafios da atualidade numa ótica de sustentabilidade.
Bom dia. Good morning. It is with great pleasure that we welcome you all to the high-level conference Green Mining, which takes place under the Portuguese presidency of the Council of the European Union. Raw materials are essential for the development of Europe's economy. Primary raw materials are at the beginning of every industry life cycle chain and form a strong industrial base, producing a broad range of goods and applications used in everyday life and modern technologies. Today, with the participation of ministers, world-renowned experts and representatives of international and scientific organizations, we intend to provide a forum to discuss and contribute to the design, promotion, and evaluation of geological resources, policies, and activities towards sustainable development and ensuring the security of supply. This is an excellent opportunity for sharing knowledge within the principles of green mining and the contribution of the mining industry to the decarbonization, highlighting the resilience and innovation of the international mineral exploration and mining sector in a perspective of sustainable development. To welcome us and open the conference, the Minister for the Environment and Climate Action of Portugal, João Pedro Matos Fernandes, has the floor.
Good morning to you all. Colleagues of the Portuguese government, Vice President Šefčovič, distinguished hosts and guests. It's my great pleasure and honor to host you in this high-level conference on green mining here at Lisbon in Centro Cultural de Belém. In this conference, in the context of Portugal's presidency of the Council of the European Union, we will hear from governments, European institutions, industry leaders, how the mining industry and the battery value chain can contribute to the decarbonization of the whole economy, targeting carbon neutrality in 2050. Last month, European Union reached a political agreement setting into law the objective of reaching climate neutrality by 2050 and aiming to achieve negative emissions thereafter. The European climate law set a collective net greenhouse gas emission reduction target of at least 55% by 2030, with clarity on the contribution of emission reductions and removals. Furthermore, the law reinforces the role of science with the establishment of an independent scientific and advisory body and the use of greenhouse gas budget to inform the proposal of an intermediate climate target to 2040, along with stronger provision on adaptation to climate change. Portugal was the first country in the world to commit to carbon neutrality, and therefore we are delighted that the agreement of the European climate law was achieved during our presidency. The European Green Deal, the new growth strategy for Europe, provides a framework for recovery in line with the objective of making Europe the first carbon-neutral continent. The progress made so far has been significant. Europe has already reduced its emissions by 26% compared to 1990, while the economy has grown by more than 60%, showing that decarbonization and growth are totally compatible. Indeed, Europe can achieve climate neutrality and a fast society while preserving the competitiveness of its industries by investing in clean energy technologies and by increasing the production of sustainable products and services. This transition requires further scaling up of technological innovations in energy, buildings, transport, industry, and agricultural sectors. The path to climate-neutral economy is highly dependent on critical raw materials, with most clean and digital technologies and the broadening of its usage drastically increasing the demand of such raw materials. Therefore, minerals are an essential part of modern life, and the worldwide demand for lithium shows it. Let us be clear. There is no path towards carbon neutrality without clean and digital technologies, and there are no clean and digital technologies without raw materials. Our collective effort, must therefore be focused on improving full value chain sustainability from primary extraction to end product usage. That is the tendency which is already being followed by states and mining companies alike, focused on developing sustainable patterns and practices with ever-greater gains in waste reduction and resource efficiency. Achieving carbon neutrality will not be possible without a swift transition from a linear, fossil fuels-based economy model to a circular, carbon-neutral one respecting the limits of our planet. The energy transition is key to tackling climate change, but the associated reduction in greenhouse gas emissions is not enough, nor it is happening at the pace needed to achieve climate goals. In the last 5 decades, the world population has doubled while material extraction has tripled. Considering that 45% of emissions come from the production and consumption of goods and services and the production of food, we need to rethink the way we extract, produce, and consume. Recalling that the world population is estimated to reach around 10 billion by 2050, looking at the value chain is even more relevant. Therefore, modern mining activities must take on their planning and execution an intergenerational sustainable approach, focusing the 4 key components: environmental sustainability, appropriate land use, economic value, and social responsibility. In addition, best available practices must be employed in all deployments. I will be excited to hear from our guests today how these components can be integrated in designing and developing mining industry efforts. Greater efforts must be made in aligning the interests of the economy and industry in general and localized interests of the neighboring communities and settlements. We must not lose sight that these industrial complexes, even though significant local employers, have gathered a social perception of generating unbearable nuisance and environmental damages. Green mining must also be combating such sentiments through the involvement of the local population in the understanding of mutual benefits these projects could bring. This is also what was put forth within the European Green Deal and which we sincerely embrace. Portugal's recently passed law enforces the use of best available practices of all steps in the mining process and an increase in public participation of local communities and environmental associations. We are fully committed to building a complete industrial raw materials cluster in Portugal made up of competitive, professional, and highly qualified companies with sustainable practice as one of their main concerns. New and existing mining operations will be subject to more strict environmental control and a more participated procedure. The state is also reinforced in its leading role as a planning entity in the use of mineral resources, assigning rights to private parties through competitive tenders which are planned according to market needs of national resources. Certification of green raw materials is also required as an adequate stimulus for the adoption of the best market practices worldwide. We believe that the natural leading role of the European Union and its economic weight can leverage the green transition in the mining sector worldwide, and certification requirements may show themselves as an adequate tool for that end. Portugal has already adopted a framework for such certification, and we incentivize the Commission to present a proposal for the harmonization of such certifications union-wide. Now, under the new green mining law, the Portuguese government intends to launch a competitive tender for the assignment of additional mining rights for lithium. That tender will be preceded by a strategic environmental impact assessment, which is ongoing and should be published no later than November of this year. Furthermore, we have several processes at different stages of analyzing regarding prospection and exploitation rights for lithium. Let us not forget that the import of critical raw materials from third countries typically comes from regions where sustainability, environmental, but also social, is not a main concern, therefore making the global footprint of these activities much greater. And transport and shipping must also be considered, further increase the carbon footprint of such solutions. Such certification will allow for greater certainty in the environmental, social, and economic sustainability of the raw material, which in turn may allow or facilitate for more sustainable transformation into end products. Batteries and their value chain are a very good example of such implementation of sustainability, hence the focus we granted them in this high-level conference. Sustainable mining is a precondition for the clean battery value chain. And batteries are key to promote competitive sustainability and are necessary for green transport, clean energy, and to achieve climate neutrality by 2050. For that reason, the Commission's proposal of a regulation concerning batteries and waste batteries was most welcome, and the Portuguese presidency is looking forward to go as further as possible in the negotiation at member states level. It is indeed very important to reflect on the challenges, solutions, and trends along the battery value chain, as well as market requirements, because these are the core elements to achieve a competitive sustainability. A comprehensive overview of the entire process is the key to innovative solutions. Our perspective on sustainability must, however, include second use and recycling. We will have to consider the whole life cycle, since batteries are just a piece of the puzzle. If Europe's economic recovery is to be green and effective, we must increase our commitment to its circularity. By reducing material and energy consumption, we are also able to reduce pollution and waste, and to regenerate environmental systems. We need to design, to produce, to use and to manage in a way that increases the resilience time of all resources in the production and consumption system. We need to have products that give back more than what we take from the natural system. Circling back, this high-level conference will enable us to gather inputs from the Commission, governments, public bodies, and market operators on how to tackle the environmental and sustainability challenges the topic of green mining and the sustainable battery value chain bring us. I wish you all a very fruitful conference. See you soon.
We will now hear Maroš Šefčovič, Vice President of the European Commission.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to speak to you today, and I would like to extend my thanks to Ministers Fernandes and Vieira and their colleagues for organizing this high-level event. I very much appreciate the hard work and tenacity displayed by the Portuguese presidency this year, and in particular, your efforts to adopt a general approach on the proposed batteries regulation before the end of June. Portugal is set to play a key role in the strategic battery industry in the long term, as a country with enormous potential and the right ingredients to build a resilient, competitive, and sustainable battery value chain. These ingredients include an abundance of clean energy, excellent infrastructure, and a skilled workforce headed by ambitious industrial leaders. Portugal also has a significant reserves of natural resources, including lithium. And this is important as a critical raw materials play an increasingly pivotal role in Europe's future. Raw materials are an important enabler of the twin green and digital transitions, as well as the decarbonization of the EU's economy through clean and low-carbon technologies such as batteries, photovoltaics, and windmills. Ensuring secure supplies of critical raw materials will also help us to achieve open strategic autonomy in strategic industrial sectors, including defense and aerospace. The scale of the challenge is immense. To meet our needs in the renewable energy, e-mobility, and defense and space sectors alone, the EU would need up to 18 times more lithium and 5 times more cobalt in 2030, and almost 60 times more lithium and 15 times more cobalt in 2050 compared to the current supply. And it's worth remembering that there are 25 million jobs in the EU's manufacturing sector depending on these supplies. Given this, and taking into account Europe's over-reliance on a limited number of third countries for imports of critical raw materials, last year the European Commission adopted a Critical Raw Materials Action Plan and launched the European Raw Materials Alliance. Our approach is twofold. We will diversify our imports by building partnerships with mineral-rich third countries to ensure better access to sustainable and ethically sourced materials. At the same time, with Europe currently responsible for just 1% of battery-related raw materials production, we will also seek to boost our own domestic capacity for primary and secondary raw materials. I trust that Portugal will be our strategic partner in this endeavor. In doing so, we need to work together to overcome the important challenge of social acceptance by demonstrating that we will not repeat the mistakes of the past. And let me be clear on one point. Any activities related to raw materials, from exploration to post-mine closure, must be done in a socially and environmentally sustainable way. This means engaging with the local communities openly and transparently and addressing their concerns about potential environmental damage, while highlighting the benefits of the raw materials activities for combating climate change and preserving biodiversity. We also need to underline the continuing adherence of our industry to the highest European and international standards. The swift adoption of the proposed batteries regulation, which introduces the OECD's world-leading due diligence standards on raw materials into the EU's legal framework, will be a game-changer in this regard. Furthermore, to support member states and industry in holding an open and transparent dialogue on this important issue, later this year, the Commission will launch the Roundtable on Environmentally and Socially Sustainable Raw Materials Mining, which will gather together national and European public authorities, industry, NGOs, and other social partners. Also this year, the Commission will publish the EU Principles for Sustainable Raw Materials, establishing a common and non-regulatory set of principles and a list of the EU acquis that member states and companies should respect for sustainable raw materials activities. Dear friends, allow me also to encourage you to make the most of the European and national financial sources available to foster investments in raw materials projects. I call on you to use the momentum created by the Next Generation EU to build up a broad portfolio of domestic recovery projects that will not only help us to deliver on our green ambition, but also create green growth and clean jobs in our post-crisis recovery. I will conclude by looking ahead to my visit to Coimbra and Lisbon later this month. It will be wonderful to start visiting the member states again, and I'm delighted that Portugal will be my first port of call. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you an enjoyable conference.
Achieving carbon neutrality in 2050 and a reduction of at least 55% of greenhouse gases by 2030 in Europe requires a profound change in our energy system and a strong commitment to an energy transition. In the next panel, we will address the key actions in national decarbonization strategies. For the panel, National Approaches to a Global Issue, we have the participation of Mika Lintilä, Minister of Economic Affairs of Finland, Sara Agesen-Muñoz, Secretary of State for Energy of Spain, Arifin Tasrif, Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources of Indonesia, and as the host of this session, João Pedro Matos Fernandes, Minister for the Environment and Climate Action of Portugal.
Well, good morning again. This is the first panel of this conference, and I'll be your host. I have three colleagues from three different countries, from Finland, from Spain, and from Indonesia. Thank you for being with us. And I will start with Mika from Finland. Finland, it's really important to be here in this conference because I can almost say that they invent the concept of green mining since 2011. And Mika Lintilä is the Minister of Economic Affairs of Finland, and it's really important that you are here with us. So please, Mika, take the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning. Well, actually, it's almost midday here in Finland. But dear ministers and commissioner, dear guests, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to start by thank you for the opportunity to share some experiences and thoughts on raw materials from national and global approaches. I would like to start with the big picture. As we know, the European Union has set the goals and targets for climate neutrality, and the EU is determined to promote the goals of the Paris Agreement. Our government in Finland has the ambitious target to be carbon neutral by 2035. At the same time, the evolution of battery technologies has made it possible to take powerful steps towards low emission targets. Minerals play a significant role as vital part of the solutions. Raw materials, especially the critical ones, are key enablers of energy transition and have become a strategic issue. Access to resources is essential in carrying out the European Green Deal. There are major business opportunities in critical raw materials, advanced battery materials, and improvement of resource efficiency and circularity related to them. These are areas where we already have a strong presence. Circular use of resources is an essential part of our approach in the European raw material supply. We embrace life cycle thinking and can have the whole battery ecosystem and recycling in place. Among the first countries in the world, Finland's very first national battery strategy was launched in the beginning in this year. It's closely linked to European Union's battery strategy. Both of them aim to build an innovative, competitive, and a sustainable battery industry in Europe. Finland is one of the leading mining countries in Europe, and we can supply sustainable, responsible, produced raw materials globally. Our regulation and modern methods guarantee that our production is done in a sustainable manner. Traceability of minerals, good governance, and state-of-the-art of production methods and environmental performance are essential. These areas require responsible practices and sustainability, which will be our competitive edge in the global market. These actions will speed up our transition towards digital and green economy. I want to highlight that resource development and innovations have been recognized as crucial building blocks of making mining more sustainable. Let me be clear. Investments and collaboration in research should be fostered. Ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, responsible mining and sustainable minerals are the stronghold of Europe when we recover from pandemic. Secure raw material supply in the backbone of flourishing industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mika. And I have an additional question for you. If you can explain us what are in your country the most complex social responsibility challenges for the mining sector?
Thank you for this question. This is very relevant question, and social responsibility is an essential element for the mining sector. And in Finland has paid attention to social responsibility and share the view of its importance to the mining industry. Regarding responsibility in Finland, our guiding principles are good governance, responsible operations, traceability, safety, which is very important, carbon neutrality, and environmental performance. Finland puts a lot of weight in the circular economy. And our government has a brand new strategy program to make circular economy a sustainable foundation for our economy. And of course, Finnish industry carries out the principles of circular economy in its operations in the different fields of the industrial mining and battery sector also. They are an essential part of our industry and very important. In Finland, social responsibility requires close cooperation with public and private sectors. And I want to encourage this cooperation and open dialogue.
Thank you, Mika. Portugal is also fully committed with the principles of circular economy, and it is really important what we have just heard from you. Now I'll go to Spain, to Sara Agasan Muñoz, which is the Secretary of State of Energy on Spain. We all know that Spain is a big country with a diverse geological territory, and that's why Spain, it is so important to be discussed in here, and it is so important that we can have your experience. So, Sara, please take the floor and help us to understand what you are doing in your country and what you intend to do in the near future.
Good morning, dear colleagues, dear João, obrigada. Thank you so much for bringing me the opportunity to be here today. I'm very glad to be here to speak about a topic of such a global importance to guarantee that is the main issue today. It's tackling climate change and the energy transition in a sustainable manner. As we all know, there are different key factors on the energy transition. I would like to stress two of them. First, the switch from fossil fuels to renewables. And secondly, I think it's very important to think about the increase of electrification in the economy. To consider our national approach, we need to start thinking about energy security, new geopolitics of the energy transition, the key principles like circular economy first, and of course, green sustainable mining. The good news is that the challenges of energy security is moving away from securing energy resources since renewables are widely available, thanks to the penetration of renewables and the increasing role of storage solutions and impacts in the economy of oil and gas prices. We can see that it will be reduced in the future, so we will be more competitive. On the other hand, the transition to a climate neutral and resource efficient society by 2050 is also about ensuring the supply chain for this transition is available. That means certain mineral raw materials that will experience an increased demand while fully decarbonizing the economy. This will be the new challenges for energy security. The European Union lists 30 raw materials as critical in 2020 due to risk of supply, shortage, and vulnerability along the value chain. With the corresponding impacts on the economy, we can expect this list to increase as we advance in the energy transition. For instance, lithium, nickel, cobalt, rare earth elements are very important for the energy transition, very important for solar PV, fuel cells, electric vehicles, batteries, energy storage, or wind turbines. As expressed today in the report by the International Energy Agency, the role of critical mineral in clean energy transitions, the mineral demand for clean energy technology will rise by at least 4 times by 2040 to meet the climate goals. If we look at lithium, it's one of the most relevant minerals for the energy transition since it's used for batteries manufacture. Today, more than 95% of the global lithium production is concentrated in 4 countries: Australia, China, Chile, and Argentina. This process is increasingly complex given the growing globalization of the energy markets and the interrelation between the economies and the different countries. My first takeaway at this conference is that we need a common EU geopolitical approach, not only to address supply concerns, but also to secure a sustainable energy transition, for instance, through green mining. Since production of minerals that are relevant for energy transition is more geographically concentrated than fossil resources, my second takeaway for this session is that we need a common European strategy to maximize self-supply of critical raw materials for the energy transition. And of course, we need to cooperate with our colleagues from other countries. Currently, our domestic production of raw materials is not enough to meet the needs today, neither in the future. Dependence on imports is still very high, particularly if we talk about energy transition. We need to carefully design future scenarios for sustainable supply and demand in the European Union. I would like to stress, as my colleagues from Finland, the importance of circular economy. Before going into green mining, I believe we need to look beyond the current extractive industrial model and focus on decoupling the economic activity from consumption of resources. The linear economy has to change. We must transform all the elements of the take, make, waste system, how we manage resources, how we make and use products, and what we do with the materials afterwards. Only then it will make sense to think about green mining. Circular economies will be at the top of the political agenda. Circular economy is an opportunity. It's also about economic growth associated with resource efficiency and industrial transformation, together with new business models, services, and results at the end in new green jobs. My third takeaway today to share with all of you is that the EU must become a major global player in the 3 Rs: reducing, reusing, and recycling. Circular economy, again, should be a key element of recovery plans. In this regard, Spain's circular economy strategy aims to reduce national material consumption in relation to GDP by 30% in 2030, while reducing waste generation by 15% compared with 2010. Nevertheless, we also have to be realistic, as today's circular economy is not enough and demand will increase. That means that there is a need for green mining. In the context of ecological transition, our first goal must be to ensure that the extraction of these raw materials is sustainable. To do this, we need to carefully update our regulatory framework on mining management to adapt it to the current situation. Better integrating mineral resources into regional planning must be a priority. We need to fully guarantee the protection of environment in mining activities. We need to encourage good practices for the prevention of environmental impacts, for the protection of biodiversity, for the creation of ecological corridors, and for the development of green infrastructure and recovery of degraded lands. It is critical to improve public awareness. I share the concerns by my colleagues from Finland. Social responsibility, open dialogues is very important. Raw materials have a huge potential in this transition, and we need them, and we can use them to stimulate jobs and stimulate the economy. We need to communicate better, develop a more efficient and sustainable mineral raw materials industry 4.0. This industry needs to be an important piece of ecological transitions because, colleagues, This industry will be a founding pillar to achieve objectives required by the 2030 agenda, by our national energy and climate plans and the Paris agreements. Likewise, research, development, innovation will be a cornerstone in these to achieve the objectives of zero waste and climate neutrality by 2050. Colleagues, Spain's National Climate and Energy Plan clearly noted that in the context of energy transition, our industrial policy will be affected by the new global demand for raw materials. In this extraordinary technological transformation that is taking place at this very moment, we need to ensure the supply. Likewise, Spain's long-term strategy clearly established reuse and recycling as a very first option to fit productive processes in the pathway towards climate neutrality by 2050. Only once this option has been exhausted, the strategy recommends the use of domestic mineral resources, following the EU environmental and sustainability standards and contributing to the reduction of the global emission by promoting local extraction and consumption. Spain, therefore, is working on a national roadmap for the sustainable management of local raw materials, building on environment, social and economic sustainability, on the most innovative and efficient techniques on reducing both greenhouse gases and our dependence on imports, and as a result, seeking for security of supply. Dear colleagues, I'm very glad that I have the opportunity today to reflect in this important topic. Thank you, João. Obrigada.
Thank you so much, Sara. You were really clear in your presentation, and I have no doubt that if we are talking at the same time in Europe in a green transition and also on a digital transition, definitely we have to talk about green mining. But one question for you, if you can say something more about the Spanish strategy for promoting sustainable development in mining industry. You have explained lots of things, but maybe you have some good examples to show us.
Thank you, João. Thank you for your questions. As I expressed before, our strategy to promote sustainable development in the mining industry is considered through horizontal strategic documents and a future-specific roadmap for the sustainable management in the mineral raw materials. First, the national energy and climate plans, and second, the long-term decarbonization strategy. These are the two big pillars that will lead us to the climate neutrality by 2050. Both documents include a broad perspective with objectives together with policies and measures needed to move along this ecological transition. But they also include cross-sectoral elements that are very important in this path as mineral raw materials. The National Climate Energy Plan takes into consideration that our industrial policy will be affected, as I mentioned, by these new demands profiles of raw materials and will imply significant change. In the Spanish long-term decarbonization strategy, we also established 4 orientations that must guide national policy in relation to raw materials. First, efficiency and circular economy. Second, consolidating the sustainable management. Third, guarantee the security of supply and the compliance with environmental, geostrategic and social justice requirements in the import of mineral raw materials. And fourthly, and last but not least, promote the strategic mineral raw industry in the energy transition and market transparency. Taking all these elements into account, we are working at a national level, as I mentioned before, in the roadmap for sustainable management of mineral raw materials. We are working hard on this, and I hope we can have a first draft for a public audience in the next months. At the end of the last year, in the process of elaboration of this roadmap, we launched a public consultation with broad participation, all the stakeholders, civil society, public administration, citizens and companies. We have a lot of inputs that we are taking into consideration in the development of the roadmap. We aim at building a reliable, stable framework to enable and encourage investment, promote innovation, promote environmental, social, and governance standards, and contribute to the energy transition. And at the same time, ensure we can provide economic growth and green jobs creation. Thank you very much, João. Obrigada.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much. And then now we will move to Indonesia and to my colleague Arifin Tasrif, the Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources of Indonesia. Indonesia is one of the world's largest exporters of mineral resources, but we know that different geographies doesn't mean different concerns. And we are able to know what Indonesia is doing to do things on a more sustainable way. And that's why we are so pleased to have with us our colleague from Indonesia, Mr. Tasrif. So please take the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister Fernandes. Dear colleague speakers, Minister of Economic Affairs of Finland and then State Secretary of Spain. Good afternoon from Jakarta. Indonesia is committed to the transition, its current development pathway towards low carbon and climate resilience in phased approach. In meeting the country's energy demand, Indonesia aims to achieve renewable energy share of 23% in the energy mix in 2025. This policy, coupled with Indonesia's commitment in reducing emissions by 29% by 2030 or 41% with international support, is a clear path to a greener and cleaner energy system. We are currently accelerating emissions reduction in order to achieve net zero emissions, including by preparing a draft for presidential regulation on the implementation of national determined contribution to significantly reduce our carbon emission in national development. Indonesia is a major producer of mining commodities such as steam coal, tin, nickel, copper, and others. The mining sector is still a mainstay sector for Indonesia because it serves as a source of state revenue, job creation, and then most importantly, key driver for regional development, since most of the mining locations are in the remote areas. There are around 5,700 mining permits and contracts in Indonesia. And then this mining sector provides quite significant revenue for the nations. And the total investment is about $4.2 billion. The mining sectors in an activity that involves the use of a significant area of land within a certain time. These mining activities may create changes in landscape and morphology. In order to preserve the surrounding environment of mining area, a progressive reclamation to mining operations is tightly regulated by Indonesia's new mining law in 2020. There are at least three things that become the focus of changes in the reclamation and mine closure policies. Namely, first, the imposition of criminal sanctions. Second, control the balance between the land to be cleared and the land that has been reclaimed during the operation. And the third, controlling the final ex-mining pit voids. In addition to that, as resources extracted by mining are generally considered to be a non-renewable, the Indonesian government also implemented several policies to support green mining. Namely, mine reclamation should improve the status and function of forestry area. For instance, production forest upgraded to protected forest or forest park. Pit lakes as a legacy mining activity should provide environmental services such as water reservoir, flood retention, fishery, tourism. Develop a sustained community development and community empowerment program and revive the agrarian culture as Indonesia identity after post-mining as implemented. We transform ex-mine area to another sources of energy and encourage the utilization of renewable energy in mining production activity. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, promoting sustainable development in mining industry relies on how mining can be improved, its performance in both the environmental and socio-economic areas, and thus contribute enormously to sustainable development at the mine level. I have to emphasize once again that the Indonesian government always views that economic consideration and interest cannot be exchanged for environmental damage or unsustainable functions of the natural environment and social communities. Thank you, and I do sincerely hope that this conference will achieve its objective and pave great progress through wide-ranging discussions.
Well, thank you so much, my dear Indonesian colleague. I have a question for you. What has been the role of the Indonesian government in promoting sustainability in mining, and how has the industrial sector reacted, as we know that there is a very strong industrial sector in mining in your country?
Can you repeat, please? Mr. Fernandez, can you?
Yes, I'm listening to you. We are all listening to you.
Yes.
Please continue.
Well, can you point out the question that you raised? Sorry.
Yes, sure. I was asking you what has been the role of the Indonesian government in promoting the sustainability in mining, and how the industrial sector is accepting or reacting to your new concerns and rules.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, we identified several key industry issues to focus on, yes, such as energy efficiency, greenhouse gas emissions reductions, waste management, increased productivity, and mine closure and rehabilitations. We have also set the target to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, mainly from the forest and land use sectors. So in this context, we are currently working hand in hand with our partners in the RED or RED Plus to reduce emissions from deforestation and land degradations. Of course, we cooperate with minor industries in the country that so far the response is quite positive, yeah, because right now we also already issue new law in the 2020, which is related to the rehabilitation, yeah, and then the sanction which is related to the regulation, etc. So basically, we are really to cooperate with all the other countries, yeah, to work together to build such kind of sustainable industry, yeah, in order to support the reduction of the emission. Then we come to the zero emission target. Thank you.
Muito obrigado. Agradeço. Thank you so much. I thank to all the three participants in this panel, and we will follow immediately. And Paula Diniz will be our next host on the next panel. Thank you and good morning.
The room will now be disinfected, and we will resume the session in a few minutes. Raw materials are an essential platform for the decarbonization of the economy, enabling massive migration from fossil fuels to electricity, namely in the sector of transport, energy, and industrial applications. To tell us about the challenges and opportunities in the green mining market, we welcome the following speakers. Peter Handley, Head of the Energy-Intensive Industries and Raw Materials, European Commission's Directorate General for Growth, João Bernardo, Directorate General for Energy and Geology, Paula Chaves, Director of Institutional Relations at MATSA, and Paula Diniz, Head of Mining Management Division at the Directorate General for Energy and Geology, that will be the moderator of this session.
Good morning, everybody. I welcome you all to this section 2 about the opportunities and challenges of the green mining. As it was previously announced, we will have 3 speakers, and in order to accomplish with the exigent time schedule, each speaker will have 5 minutes for the initial address, which will be followed by 1 or 2 questions, for which they will have more 5 to 7 minutes each. So the first speaker, as it has been already announced, is Peter Handley, which is since September 2017 the head of the Energy Intensive Industries and Raw Materials Unit in the European Commission's Directorate General for Growth. He was previously head of the Resource Efficiency Unit at the Secretariat General, where he was responsible for coordination of Energy Union 2030 Climate and Energy Package, Low Emission Mobility Strategy and the Circular Economy. I welcome you, Peter. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Paula. And thanks very much for inviting the Commission to come to this conference, this presidency conference in strength. And since you've already heard from Vice President Šefčovič at the opening, and you'll hear from my new director, fellow Portuguese, Joachim, the closing session, I'm going to be pretty brief. I'm not going to use my 5 minutes. What I will say is, of course, raw materials are going to be very important for the green and digital transition that we want to do in Europe. And we've addressed this last year in our Critical Raw Materials Action Plan. The only message I would pass are firstly that we did something novel. We didn't just look at the past, we looked at the future. We did a sort of forecasting exercise for what our economy would need by 2030 and also by 2050 if we are to achieve our Paris Agreement and circular economy goals. And the answer was, we're going to need to do a lot more circularity, a lot more recycling, become much more resource efficient, but there will inevitably still be a need for metals and minerals from the ground. And Europe is actually between 75% and 100% import dependent on these metals, particularly the most critical ones. So we're going to have to look at what we can do to reduce that exposure. And the solution is partly to diversify our external sourcing, but also to look at what we can do with the resources we have in Europe, whether doing better on recovery and recycling or doing mining, but in a very sustainable way. So we're going to need this for battery raw materials, but also for other raw materials that will be needed for a variety of industrial purposes. So that's so much for what we came out with last September, and we're busy implementing strategies along that line now. Today, in fact, the Commission is currently talking about the industrial strategy of Europe, and raw materials are featuring prominently in there, both as part of the resilience and open strategic autonomy agenda, how we can avoid the kind of disruptions we've seen in the last year following on from the COVID-19 crisis, but also because we've done an analysis of where the European economy has strategic dependencies and capabilities. And raw materials are one of those areas where we're passing certain messages. One of the messages we're passing is member states should be looking very much at the whole question of electric motors. Now, these are going to probably replace the classic combustion engine in cars before too many years are out. But to have an effective electric motor, you need magnets, And these are magnets which are made from rare earths. So there's a whole value chain in there where we're going to need to develop much more resilience in Europe. So I think I'll basically stop there, except just to say that I've got one new job responsibility which came to me a month ago, and it's hydrogen. So I'm working on the Clean Hydrogen Alliance, as well as the European Raw Materials Alliance. And I know that hydrogen from renewables is a very important thing for Portugal. So I look forward to working closer with you on that side. Thank you, Pavilla. Back to you.
Thank you, Peter, for your clear and understandable explanation about what the European Commission has been, all the work that has been doing, and the new challenges now with the hydrogen. I would like to ask you a question, considering what has been done by the European Commission, started on 2080, where you launched the Raw Materials Initiative, then on 2012, the European Innovation Partnership, and after with the action plan on batteries, and more recently, the new revision of the critical raw materials. I would like to ask you, how can the Commission, how can the European Union support member states in developing the necessary actions to promote the development and use of critical raw materials in order to reduce the dependency from third countries? Peter?
Yeah, thank you. So we're actually working very much with member states through the Raw Materials Supply Group and the European Innovation Partnership on Raw Materials to look at what resources we have in Europe and really to check at what level of maturity these resources are, and then to try and identify the investments that would be needed to make these things viable. This is in the action plan. So we're hoping that member states can really, if you like, refresh their geological knowledge, maybe look deeper than in the past. Many member states have geological data which is 20, 30 years old and doesn't go very deep in the ground. We're also looking at member states to really identify past mining activities where there is mining waste left behind, which may not have been valuable in the past, but which contains lots of the things that we're interested in today, whether it's scandium, titanium, rare earths. These are present in lots of mining waste, including bauxite residues and also coal mining waste. So we also see opportunities to help those parts of Europe which are coal regions, which will be transitioning away from coal, to try and keep that expertise and engineering knowledge relevant and to create jobs which are future-looking jobs in those regions.
Thank you, Peter. It is really important to make the transition and to get the best out of the new opportunities and face the challenges we have. Knowing that the European Commission, as it has already been mentioned by the Vice President Maroš Šefčovič, the European Commission is committed since April 2019 to the implementation of the Strategic Action Plan on batteries, to building a strategic battery value chain in Europe. The European Commission is developing the EU principles for sustainable raw materials, and in an ad hoc working group on the raw material supply group, where Portugal is also a member and participates. In your opinion, how can these principles, these EU principles for sustainable raw materials, contribute to increase the mining public acceptance, the trust, the awareness and transparency? This is mainly because we need to get closer to the populations, to the communities, and to make them understand our dependency on mineral resources and on the importance and on the possibility of making the exploration and exploitation with a sustainable way. So I would like to ask you this: how can these principles contribute to increase mining public acceptance? Peter?
Yes, thank you. This has been work that we've been busy on for almost 2 years now, and we've tried to draw on the best available expertise and see what good models are out there. The idea is to show that if we're going to do mining in Europe, it's going to be done in the right way, in full compliance with European regulation and how it's implemented at the national level. The idea is to show that whatever we do has to be done with societal acceptance, and that means engaging actively with local communities, sharing the benefits of projects with local communities, bringing tax revenue into the regions which are going to have these kind of raw material activities. And it's also demonstrating that we want to hit the highest levels of performance in terms of good climate and environmental results, because mining in the past was a very dirty operation. It's becoming highly technological these days, and there are processes out there which can really reduce the greenhouse gas footprint of mining and refining operations, and also reduce water use and minimize impacts on biodiversity and so forth. So those are the kind of practices that we want to encourage in Europe, because we know it's a hard sell to convince the public in any European member state that we should be doing things here rather than just buying products or importing metals as we've done historically from abroad. So we're going to organize a conference, and we're going to invite a wide range of stakeholders, including some of those organizations which have very valid arguments about why they don't like mining. And we're going to have a good sort of virtual face-to-face discussion about this, and hopefully we'll do this before the summer. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Many thanks for your clear and important explanation, and great job that you are doing. Thank you very much. Now we will come to the second speaker, which is João Bernardo. João Bernardo is since 2018 the Director General for Energy and Geology, which is the Portuguese mining authority. He has been working for 20 years as head of departments of the areas endogenous resources, energy efficiency, and energy sustainability at the Directorate General for Energy and Geology. He has been a member of the board of directors of the Energy Agency, ADEN, for several years. He has a degree in silviculture from the University of Lisbon with a specialization in forest products technology. So, you are welcome, João, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Paula, for giving me the floor. I want to greet everyone who is attending this conference, this important conference, and I want to say that I'm very pleased to be here, because this is a very important issue for the whole community and for Europe. I want to start by showing some slides that I have prepared. Okay, sorry. I've been too fast. Okay. First of all, let me start by introducing the institution I represent, the General Directorate for Energy and Geology, DGEG. As Paula said before, DGEG is a Portuguese mining authority, and DGEG mission is to contribute to the design, promotion, evaluation, monitoring of policies and activities of geological resources in a perspective of sustainable development and guarantee of security of supply. We are also responsible for the knowledge, qualification, and valorization of geological resources, and for the licensing and concession producers for public domain assets. Before I start to enter in my main speech, I want to take some steps back and make some history about what are the geological resources in Portugal and in the world, the importance. Since the beginning, the story of mankind was being linked to the use of mineral resources. This link is a sum of all materials that we discover, combined, and invented. Minerals are essential for us, not only for our quality of life, but for the very survival of human species. From the Stone Age through the period known as Middle Age, which includes Copper, Bronze, and Iron Ages, between 300,000 before Christ and 100 after Christ, minerals deeply marked civilizations. Since then, mineral research kept a crucial role in the world. Castles, cathedrals, bridges, weapons, tools, medicines and medical instruments, arts, painting, sculpture, music. First, steel, a link between iron and carbon, and then coal and oil, with their important role in the evolution of industrialization and in transport. The latter also broke levels of pollution never seen before, and that we are solving with the energy transition now. When we start to worry about changing the effects of fossil fuels, another era has arrived with communications and computerization, the Silicon Age in the last 40 years. Now, with digitalization and electrification, we are about to enter the age of lithium and rare earth elements. And this is very important for us because we are a country with a lot of resources. But the question is Portugal a mining country? From the point of view of its subsoil, the country is a true museum of mines and mineralogy. Geodiversity is fantastic. In a relatively limited territory, samples of almost all ores are found. Academically, Portugal is a rich country. We have the largest tungsten mine in Europe, in Penasqueira. The mine of Neves Corvo is one of the largest copper exploration sites in the European Union. And Aljustrel in Alentejo is one of the main mines located in the Iberian Period Belt, about 250 kilometers long and about 30 to 15 kilometers wide, between Alcácer do Sal and Seville in Spain. And our resources that we have been exploited since the Roman age and Roman era, and along all the ages that we have a historical and a very great heritage in mineral resources. And some of them are very significant to the European Union. For instance, we are the third in the European Union ranking of exploiting copper. Tungsten, the second in the rank. And we are in fourth in the European Union ranking with the exploitation of ornamental stones. So this is a small country with great possibilities. A glance at the Portuguese mining sector, I could say that in 2015, legislative framework integrating and reconciliation perspective of various public interests was sought, was present in the treatment of geological resources. Consequently, for several years now, the sector has been adapting these practices to accommodate the need to impose an economic rationale in the context of responsible exploitation, with a rigorous and adequate weighting and protection of environmental values and assets present. It was also been promoting the valorization of territories where mining activities carried out and accompanied by the improvement of in-living conditions of respective populations. The mining activity is a very relevant vector for achievement of the public objectives on energy transition, not only in terms of supplying and essential raw materials such as lithium or copper, but also in the area of materialization, self-consumption projects for a renewable energy source. These figures that I show you in this slide is the numbers and figures that we can provide for this important sector. And what about Portugal and the sustainable lithium? Lithium plays, of course, a central role in the entire energy decarbonization agenda. This is very well known for all us. The country's unique advantage of having this material resource in abundance is also responsible in our contribution to the decarbonization of economy through the development of mining projects in order to guarantee the sustainable procedures and supply of mineral resources to downstream industry. A public tender for lithium exploration is under preparation with the prior strategic environment assessing, including the localization of the principal areas. Natural resources are for everything. We need for everything. We need natural resources with source in biological resources, water resources, energy resources, and mineral resources. They are all important, all activities that deal with natural resources. The agriculture is by far the most polluting and they have the greatest impact in the environment. Energy production is the second activity with greatest responsibility for pollution levels. Minerals are the last activity responsible for pollutions, and we are seek for is compliance with environmental targets. So let me show you the action plan, the European, the Commission action plan for critical raw materials. As you can see, the energy, the digital transition will lead to a drastic increase in European demand for certain critical materials. For example, lithium is expected to grow by 2030 around 70 times current consumption. So we have to somewhat to make this internalization in Europe, these materials, this exploitation. Otherwise, we can be with a great dependence for the imports from these materials from abroad. Just to finish, to show the importance of mineral resources, we can see in the transport, mobility, wind energy, solar panels that are responsible for the energy transition, the quantity, the amount of raw materials that we use to make this thing possible. And thank you for your attention. I'm available for any question that you want to put. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much, João, for your clear presentation and the importance. As you state, lithium plays a central role in the entire energy decarbonization agenda, and mineral resources are the base and the core for the energy transition. I would like to ask you one question, which is, in your opinion, is Portugal prepared for the valorization of mineral resources in the energy transition?
Thank you, Paula, for this question. I think so. Portugal has very important mineral resources, as it's become clear in my presentation, and due to its diversified geology, we have critical materials that we could apply in energy transition. And also we have base materials, and for that I think we are very prepared. Our role is, however, the responsibility to create conditions to meet society needs for a responsible approach to social, economic, and environmental performance. So it is important to have materials, and by the other side to have commitment of the public institutions and the state to create these conditions to meet social and environmental aspects. And we have also need to improve our communication skills and the approach to the populations, and to give a clear message of the importance of raw materials and the importance for the add value to their territory and for their development. Raw materials could create jobs in some regions of the country where jobs are very low, and it can create opportunities that are important to these territories. I think the message, the communication is the one thing that is not quite improving yet, but I think we could improve this in the present and in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, João. I fully agree with you. I think communication is the base of everything, because we need to build up on dialogue, awareness, trust, confidence, and come closer to the populations and to the public for them to understand why we need mineral resources, and make them understand that it is possible to make the exploration and extraction in sustainable ways, with the sustainable principles, according to the Sustainable Development Goals, as it has already been explained. I will have just one more question for you. In order, we know that there is going to be launched a new mining legislation. What are the main axes of this green mining legislation in Portugal? João?
Okay, the legislation has three main axes. The first one is a most demanding standards of environmental sustainability and the activity of extracting mineral resources. This is one. The second is related to the reinforcement of information availability, transparency, of public participation, reinforcement of municipalities' intervention, and ensure greater transparency of administration procedures. This is the second. The third is consists in a fair distribution of economic benefits between the state, which is the owner of the resource, the municipalities where the exploitation occurs, and of course the populations. This is all the practice that we have been put in place before the legislation. This is only a formalization for what have been done in the past. Thank you.
Thank you very much, João, for your answers. I think it was really clear about the potential and the geodiversity that we have in Portugal, and what we are committed to do according to the green mining and sustainable principles. Now I welcome to the next speaker, which is Paula Chaves. Paula holds a degree in law and an executive MBA. She has been working for 70 years, has 70 years of experience as a lawyer, and more 12 years in Matsa, which is a mining company in Spain. She has previous positions as lawyer and labor relations in Nabegonwa. Paula, you are welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Paula. Good morning to all attendees, and thank you to the Ministry of Environment and Climate Action of Portugal for inviting me to this conference. I have some slides to introduce Matsa and our business model. Thank you. So, moving forward, Matsa is a Spanish mining company. We can move. Can you please pass the slide? Thank you. So MATSA is a Spanish mining company that holds 3 underground mines in the province of Huelva in Spain. Since 2019, I'm glad to say that we are developing exploration activities as well in Portugal through our Portuguese subsidiary called Emisurmin. Can you pass, please? In Huelva, the company operates 3 underground mines and a process plant that operates 24 hours, 365 days per year. And we produce copper, zinc, and lead concentrate. Our concentrates are mainly shipped to China, and thanks to the explorations done until now, the project has estimated mineral resources for more than 20 years. MATSA developed its mission, vision, and values based on the premise that mining, minerals, and metals are necessary for the development of many countries and essential for the modern life. Therefore, we understand our activity as a way of promoting development and well-being for people. Now you will see some pictures of our facilities at Spain. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paula, for your presentation. Knowing that MATSA is a mining company and of course will be using sustainable principles in their operation, I would like you to ask what are the sustainable principles that you are currently practicing in MATSA company, knowing that MATSA is a worldwide company working not only in Spain but also in other countries?
Yes, thank you, Paula. So MATSA sustainability principles are focused mainly in promoting health and safety at work for our employees, contributed for the sustainable development in the area where we operate, and procure fair and ethical business with our commercial partner, as well, and of course, to run a profitable operation for our shareholders. The company grouped their principles in 3 different areas: governance, social, and environmental. And we develop programs and policies for each one of these areas. Regarding the governance, for example, our main commitment is to comply with all country and international regulation wherever we operate, to keep an open dialogue and communication with governments and communities, and to research win-and-win relationships based on mutual trust and high ethical standards. From a social perspective, we are committed to promote regional and sustainable development and to contribute to a better quality of life and a better world for tomorrow, more inclusive and more diverse. From the environment, we contribute with efficient use of natural resources, minimizing environmental impact and planning the social and environmental closure of our projects. This is how we approach the sustainability strategy of MATSA in Spain and in the next years, hopefully in Portugal.
Thank you, Paula. And getting what you said, what you just mentioned about the 3 levels of principles at the governance, environmental, and social, I would like to ask you, knowing that you have projects and in Portugal, in the Iberian Pyrite Belt, I would like you, in your opinion, which are the success keys for achieving the mining public acceptance on the local communities and from the public in general? What are the main keys of success? Would you please tell us?
Thank you, Paula. So in my view, one of the key factors to get the acceptance of the community is for sure compliance with all regulations. And the secondly factor, I would say that it's safety. So this is a key item to gain the trust of the communities, as well as have transparency and an open dialogue with mayors and government. My view is that we also need to help the communities to understand that mining operates nowadays in a different way that it should be. It was done in the past, because there are old beliefs that still damage the mining sector image, and we need to start talking all the time about modern mining, green mining, technology, equipments operate by remote control and things like this. As well, we need to help all the communities to diversify, and in some places to reduce dependence on mining. Moreover, I would say that we need good examples of how we close our mines somewhere. Thank you, Paula.
Thank you very much, Paula. In fact, in Portugal, the Iberian Pyrite Belt, we have several operations going, and it is a great honor for us to know that we have now mining companies which are capable of making the exploration and the extraction in a sustainable way. So I would like to ask you one more question. Just would you please tell us how do you have any communication projects in the Matsa company? Anything that you come to the communities? What do you advise us to do in order to de-age? Do you make projects with schools or universities, or how do you reach the communities? Thank you.
Thank you. So at Matsa, or wherever we operate, we have visit site at the projects where all the communities can come and visit the operation. That is a key point for the transparency of our operations. We have many social programs training the communities on how to deal with safety. We have some help for students so that we link those students to the rural areas, and we avoid them leaving these communities and going to the cities. So we try to have some entrepreneurs programs trying to promote people thinking in different type of businesses apart from mining.
Thank you, Paula. As we saw and as we listened, we know that mining companies are committed to sustainable mining principles in order to bring all the best, all the new technologies, all the green mining equipments and structures. So it is really important what we just listened in these three very good presentations regarding the importance of the mineral resources in the modern societies, regarding the dependency that we have on mineral resources, and considering that we are not intending to reduce the consumption of mineral resources and of everything. It is really important for us to be responsible, to be aware that we really need mineral resources in our daily lives. So thank you very much, the three speakers of this panel. And I think it was a very good message to address to everyone. Thank you very much.
I'll take a short break and we'll be back in 15 minutes. Thank you.
A concretização do Pacto Ecológico Europeu e, em particular, o objetivo de tornar a Europa no primeiro continente climaticamente neutro exige uma transformação profunda do sistema energético europeu. Para esse efeito, a presidência portuguesa do Conselho da União Europeia estabeleceu 7 prioridades que irão traçar o caminho desta transformação energética. A primeira é, desde logo, reconhecer que é necessário desenvolver um mercado interno energético eficaz, coeso e competitivo, com um elevado nível de proteção do consumidor, acesso equitativo e aumento da capacidade de produção. O segundo é assegurar a promoção da eficiência energética em todos os setores, sendo esta uma opção basilar para a concretização dos objetivos europeus em linha com o Acordo de Paris, bem como uma das formas mais eficazes e justas de assegurar a transição para uma economia neutra em carbono. O terceiro, e neste quadro, é que é incontornável maximizar o potencial das renováveis e de um sistema energético descentralizado através do fomento do autoconsumo e das comunidades energéticas. Em quarto lugar, encorajar o debate em torno do hidrogênio verde e dos mecanismos de apoio para a criação de um verdadeiro mercado para este hidrogênio. Em quinto, concretizar a vaga de renovação, que pode ter um papel crucial na recuperação da economia, apoiando a reabilitação de edifícios, contribuindo para a melhoria da eficiência energética, apoiando a economia circular e promovendo o bem-estar e a inclusão social, combatendo, por fim, a pobreza energética. Em sexto, a criação de condições para o armazenamento, as smart grids e as interligações, que são essenciais para sustentar o crescimento do mercado energético e permitir a melhor integração e o crescimento das fontes de energia renovável. Por fim, em sétimo, promover as relações externas e a diplomacia energética com os nossos principais parceiros, bem como organizações e iniciativas internacionais. Relativamente aos objetivos na área de energia, é a nossa ambição a obtenção de uma abordagem geral do Conselho na revisão do regulamento das redes transeuropeias de energia, fundamental para assegurar que a Europa atinja o objetivo da neutralidade climática. Assumimos igualmente como prioridade promover o debate e assegurar a adoção de conclusões do Conselho sobre a vaga de renovação. Pretendemos ainda manter o hidrogênio na ordem do dia, com troca de pontos de vista no Conselho de Energia em junho. A presidência nesta área conta ainda com 2 eventos de alto nível. A Conferência sobre o Hidrogênio e a Conferência sobre Green Mining, a realizar esta segunda no dia 5 de maio, ambas voltadas para a criação de soluções que visam contribuir para os grandes desafios da atualidade numa ótica de sustentabilidade.
Welcome back to the Green Mining Conference. We will start the panel Resilience, Innovation and Sustainability, where we will explore the high sustainability of current mining projects and the commitment and contribution of companies to decarbonization. We welcome the following speakers: Jeremy Waits, Secretary General of the European Environment Bureau; Teresa Ponce de Leão, President of the National Laboratory of Energy and Geology; Robert Grant, Director Energy of Fortescue Metals Group; and David Archer, CEO of Savannah. Mirona Koropchuk, Deputy Director of Euromines, will moderate the debate.
Good afternoon. And first of all, thank you to the Portuguese authorities for organizing such an important event. And secondly, a big thank you to all the panelists and all of you for investing your time to take part in the discussions today. As already mentioned, my name is Mirona Koropchuk, and I do represent the European Raw Materials Mining Association, covering more than 42 different minerals and metals and employing more than 350,000 people directly. Today, it will be a great honor on my side to be your guide through the panel on mining resilience, innovation, and sustainability. First segment of most strategic value chains, the European raw materials mining industry represents the backbone of a sustainable EU economy. Therefore, securing sustainable access to raw materials is essential not only for the full implementation of the Green Deal, but also to the more than 30 million jobs depending on the availability of these raw materials. How can the mining industry meet this raw materials growing demand? And how can the sector increase its resilience? What should be the main drivers for future innovation and ensuring sustainability? These are just a few questions that the panelists will try to answer and discuss during the next 45 minutes, while underlying the high sustainability of current mining projects, commitment made, and the contribution to decarbonization. That being said, our first panelist, Mr. Jeremy Waits, is the Secretary General of the European Environment Bureau, Europe's largest network of environmental citizens organizations. In a career that has included grassroots activism, freelance consultancy, working as an international civil servant, respect for the environment has always been Mr. Waits' main concern and priority. Without further ado, Mr. Waits, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, good afternoon to all of you. It's a great pleasure to be able to join this event. And yeah, without more ado, I'd like to jump into the topic. And I think we've been asked to accept a premise that modern mining is highly sustainable, and the implication is that the main problem is how do we gain public acceptance for it? And I think those are premises that I think are somewhat questionable. I will argue that gaining public acceptance is not so much about a PR exercise, a communication exercise, as about fundamentally aligning policies with principles of environmental sustainability and social justice. So I want to take a couple of steps back and talk about mining as just one link in the chain of our current system of production and consumption. And that system is widely recognized to be unsustainable. And that's why the European Green Deal calls for a set of deeply transformative policies. It's why the European Environment Agency's State of the Environment Report 2020 makes it clear that the transition that is needed is not just about adding some end-of-pipe solutions to reduce pollution, but about a fundamental rethink of how we do things. How we feed ourselves, produce and use energy, how we house ourselves, how we move around, and so on. I appreciate that my fellow panelists who represent mining companies have a more specific focus, and that's fine. Mining is what they do. But those responsible for public policy, namely government at local, regional, national level, or the EU institutions who make decisions about where and under what conditions mining goes ahead, need to act in the broader public interest, and that means taking this broader view. So to achieve sustainability, we will need to achieve absolute reductions in demand for and consumption of raw materials in Europe, which will contribute to those other objectives. This has to be the starting point. It's important to set binding EU and national material footprint reduction targets for 2030, 2040, 2050, and to mainstream those targets into all relevant EU and national policies. That will reduce the demand for virgin resources. But even more important than setting targets is pursuing measures to reach targets. And we've not come anywhere near to exploring the full potential of those measures, though several of them are included in the Circular Economy Action Plan 2.0 that came out last year. So what measures am I talking about? Well, traditional recycling, reuse incentives and targets, phasing out single-use products when reusable alternatives exist, strict mandatory product design rules, setting out minimum requirements for durability, repairability, green public procurement, to mention a few. A shift from a model based on ownership of products to one based on access to services, as are provided, for example, by community-based leasing schemes, can also substantially reduce the amount of stuff that we need. So once you've reduced demand through ambitious circular economy measures, where do you look to meet that demand? And we would say better to exploit the full potential of recycling and urban mining before opening up new mines. Recycling end-of-life batteries, for example, could reduce global electric vehicle mineral demand through new mining substantially, for copper by 55%, lithium by 25%, cobalt and nickel by 35% by 2040. And it's technologically possible to recover these metals at rates above 90%, but current recovery is limited by the lack of strong economic drivers or policies that could encourage the use of recycled materials. In the case of lithium, current recovery targets are too low. In the EB's recent joint position paper on the EU battery proposal, we argue that lithium recovery targets should be set for at least 70% recovery in 2025, 90% in 2030, and additional requirements should apply on recycling quality to ensure part of it is battery grade, so no downcycling. This is clearly a better place to start looking for these materials than opening new mines. But to make this happen, we also need to make sure that the policy and fiscal framework incentivize this more rational use of resources. If public subsidies are going into mining rather than recycling, that will not have the desired effect, rather the opposite. Okay, so when you've done all these things and you find that you still need to do some new mining, then you get to the question of how should you do it? And here I would distinguish between environmental and social aspects, both of which are important, of course. On the environmental front, compliance with and enforcement of all laws to protect the environment is key. Both laws setting environmental standards, limiting emissions, protecting air quality and soil quality, biodiversity, but also procedural instruments such as environmental impact assessment or ORAS. And too often we've seen mining companies failing to comply with one or both of these types of measures, or regulatory authorities failing to effectively enforce them. On the technology front, no doubt big improvements have been made over time, and the use of best available techniques can definitely limit the damage, but the impact of the mine itself on the immediate environment is generally negative. So it is about damage limitation, which brings me to the social aspects. And building good relations with the local communities is crucial. Unfortunately, the mining sector does not have a good track record on this, and that's probably an understatement. Too often mining companies have come in with heavy-handed tactics, which have either backfired or worse, have resulted in serious human rights abuses, including the deaths of environmental defenders. As a rule, mines should not be imposed against the wishes of local people. It's easy for those far away to argue that some local sacrifice is needed for the greater good. But the local people are in the front line, and as my previous remarks show, whether a particular mine is the best way of achieving the greater good should be looked at in this broader context. In any case, there are some places where mining, in our view, should never be considered protected areas, which are due to increase under the 2030 biodiversity strategy, seabed mining, the Arctic. So to come in a rather roundabout way back to the question about public acceptance, mining is more likely to gain public acceptance if it's given its rightful place in the hierarchy of rational resource management, if the best available technology is used to mitigate environmental effects, and all the relevant laws are complied with, if both the companies and the regulatory bodies act in a transparent and fair way, again in compliance with the law, and if the local community is treated with respect. That still doesn't guarantee that a given project will gain public acceptance, but it will increase the chances. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Waits. Indeed, very interesting points. Given your mentioning the starting points, the measures to be taken, both at policy, economic, and social level, I would have two questions. Maybe I'll just ask them both now, and you can take the time to answer. First of them is, Several modern mining projects have already proven they are sustainable. My question is, how should the industry increase confidence and reassure people about their commitment into innovation and increasing sustainability? That's the first question. And the second one, given everything that you have mentioned during the last 5 minutes, do you think that a fully decarbonized sustainable mining industry has already become a reality, at least in Europe? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the questions. I mean, I think the first question I already have attempted to answer in the sense that I think, you know, gaining public acceptance is about doing the right thing. It's not about communicating that, you know, all mining projects are the same. Well, you said in your comment several modern mining projects are highly sustainable. I mean, I don't know if, you know, sustainable in the sense of something that you can go on doing over a long period of time, or sustainable in the sense of environmentally friendly, socially responsible. I mean, I think sustainable isn't necessarily the right word. I think we could talk about responsible mining and, you know, using the best environmental precautions. But I think, you know, getting the policies right is key to getting the public acceptance. So I would put that first. I don't think it's that we have a communication or a PR problem around it. And would you mind repeating the second question? Sorry.
Of course. Do you, as a conclusion to everything that you've said, do you think that a fully decarbonized, sustainable or responsible mining can or has maybe already become a reality, at least in Europe?
Okay, no, I mean, the short answer to that would be no. I mean, I don't think it's become a reality. I mean, it's quite interesting that, you know, we see how the role of mining for materials that will be useful in other decarbonization strategies is being very much put to the fore now, which of course puts the mining sector in a positive light in the fight against climate change, even though it's only one part of what is mined. We see a very parallel phenomenon with the chemical sector, where we have problems with toxic chemicals, and the chemical sector is making the argument, well, some of these toxic chemicals are needed for kind of wind turbine blades and so on. So yes, there are genuine tough decisions to make about trade-offs, looking at, you know, comparing, for example, the impact of transferring the vehicle fleet to electric vehicles. And of course, we say you can't do that on a one-for-one basis, you know, whereby you would reduce the carbon impact, but then you increase mining impact. So you have to look at those kind of issues. And it's not that there's just one answer that says this trumps that. But those are the kind of issues that you have to look at. And I don't think we're anything like there at the moment in those decisions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Waits. And we'll proceed with the second speaker with a PhD in electrotechnical and computer engineering at the University of Porto, as well as a postgraduate degree from the First School of Business and Management in Portugal. Mrs. Teresa Ponce de Leao is the president of the National Laboratory of Energy and Geology. Amongst others, she's also a member of the board of directors of the Agency for Energy, president of the Portuguese Association for Electric Vehicles, vice president of the European Sustainable Energy Innovation Alliance, as well as a member of the high-level group on raw materials. Mrs. Teresa Ponce de Leao, thank you for taking the time for joining us, and you have the floor.
So, thank you for the introduction. And I would like to say that I'm delighted to be here. LENEG is a research and technology operator, research and innovates to contribute to transfer of knowledge on energy and geology, to the transfer to the economy, and also to contribute to the public policies. So going straight to the point, we have defined the targets, we understand the needs, We have commitments from governments on the legal instruments in Portugal. We have the green mining law, as just heard from our minister, but we need more. We need to account what we are doing to understand whether we are or we are not in the good path, good direction. Could I pass the slide, please? Thank you. So, taking this into account, I would like to tell you about 5 points of action that will be discussed in the United Nations General Meeting in New York coming in September, and in the Conference of Parties, COP26. And this is about the points that are going to be discussed is about social contract, sustainable finance principles, sustainable resource management, supply to obtain traceability, and strategic environment assessment plans. Looking at what the Secretary General of the United Nations said about social contract, we need comprehensive social, environment, economic and environment contract to operate, integrating quality of life, just transition, climate change, mitigation and adaptation, and environment stewardship. Sorry. The second point, sustainable finances principle. We need sustainable finance principles and taxonomy, a common taxonomy. Investment should move towards environmental, social, and corporate governance, and it should be focused on a funding base based on a common sustainable finance framework. The third principle, sustainable resource management system. This is where the industries should align with principles-based sustainable resource management framework. And this framework is offered in the United Nations Economic Committee for Europe. These frameworks are the United Nations Framework Classification and the United Nations Resource Management Systems. The fourth point, supply chain and traceability. It's a long-term vision aimed at having a positive impact on nature, and stakeholders, all stakeholders, governments, industry, research institutions, can develop a comprehensive framework for traceability, transparency, already mentioned by the previous speaker, and sustainability in resource supply chain. And the last point, fifth point, strategic environment assessment. We need this assessment, the assessment plans that can help manage negative impacts, and plans to provide a comprehensive planning tool that promotes governance and innovation. As conclusion, we should look at resources as a service rather than a commodity, securing critical raw materials that will be essential, but not only to the green, but also to safeguarding of future economic resilience. To address and fulfill the Sustainable Development Goals, we must ensure that resources are managed, maximizing the benefits for all and minimizing the negative impacts. The production and the use of natural resources should ensure good social environment and economic outcomes within a new social contract to operate. Decision makers, like governments, need relevant, comprehensive and consistent information. There exists already research tools that cope with these needs, like the United Nations Framework Classification I mentioned before, and the United Nations Resource Management Systems. And to conclude, There is currently no silver bullet to make this evaluation. We must account our projects. We must be very rigorous in the tracking the path we are going to. So we need integrated circular development that is key to success, and we need to evaluate strategically this, how integrated, how circular are the projects. The United Nations framework classification can fill this gap and assist governments, regulators, investors, and industry in achieving the Agenda 2030. These tools can be essential to actors in building cross-cutting competencies and delivering the Sustainable Development Goals. Fine-tuning these tools needs research and innovation. We are researching to deliver the tools to the Portuguese government and to all stakeholders from industry and from mining industry. As Portugal is could be one of the leaders at the answer to the request of the United Nations Secretary General. And that's all for me.
Thank you so much for your valuable input. And just maybe one question, because you listed a lot of measures that should be taken and also mentioned the integrated approach. Given the main topic of this panel, the mining, resilience, innovation, and sustainability, according to your previous presentation, what do you think are the main top three, maybe, drivers for future innovation in the mining sector?
The main top three, we need good regulations, but we also need to evaluate in an accurate way whether the measures are going in the good direction. So there is plenty of space to innovate in mining industry. For instance, and looking at the projects we have, we are trying to decarbonize a mine, either by using electricity or hydrogen. We have good competencies on delivering new frameworks and new methodologies to address critical raw materials, for instance, by minimizing the waste, by reaching efficiency, by using a friendly energy environment. But we need to evaluate all this. We need to evaluate the results we are achieving in each step of the project. And that's why these tools that are being discussed worldwide, I could say, in the United Nations, there are groups from all the continents that participate in the development of these tools. Also the European Commission and Peter Handley that talked before, the DG GROW is represented in the working groups that are discussing these tools, and they are very much needed because they offer a common framework, a common taxonomy to reach the social, environment, economical, but also to introduce financial criteria to fund the projects. Only this way we will achieve our common targets for 2050.
Thank you so much for your intervention. And now we will move to our third speaker, Mr. Robert Grant, who is the Director for Energy at Fortescue Metals Group. His engineering and commercial experience spans over more than 20 years, covering international energy and the infrastructure industry. He's been 9 years Chief Executive Officer at Pacific Hydro, prior to joining Fortescue, Mr. Grant has also been the chair of the Clean Energy Investor Group, representing over 20 institutional investors owning over 70 clean energy power stations, and over 11 billion in investment in the national electricity market. Without further ado, Mr. Grant, you have the floor.
Sorry, can you hear me all now? Yeah, so I'm calling in from Perth in Western Australia, and thank you all for that kind introduction. So Fortescue Metals Group is the 4th largest iron ore miner in the world. It produces around 188 million tonnes of iron ore in the last financial year, which it sells predominantly to North Asian customers. It's a business which was started only back in 2003. It's based up in the Pilbara district of Western Australia, and it's had a very successful track record of delivering new mining infrastructure, new supply chain projects to be delivering that very substantial volumes of iron ore, and most recently delivering on what is going to be our first magnetite project, also in the Pilbara region. Probably most importantly for this conversation is the fact that I've been with Fortescue now for just on 12 months, and during that period, or when I started, the business had started to think about meeting its Paris commitments for Scope 1 and 2 emissions, and started to think very carefully about the commercial opportunities that arise out of Scope 3 emissions. And to give you some sense of the scale of those, Scope 1 and 2 emissions are in the order of 2 million tonnes a year, and the production of steel from iron ore requires probably a further 90% increase on that. So obviously the Scope 3 for us are a very significant both challenge and opportunity. But in the space of that 12 months since I've joined, we've brought forward our net zero emissions target to 2040, and about a month and a half ago, we brought that forward to 2030. And the reason we've done that is because we've made a very significant strategic decision to build a great energy business alongside a great resources business. And we've realised that, you know, the new industry of green hydrogen probably won't be born out of the old oil and gas industry. That you know, coming to the industry of and creating a new industry around green hydrogen will be done by the non legacy asset encumbered businesses, and Fortescue has just as good a chance as anybody of doing that, and particularly if it sets itself a target which is industry leading and becomes itself a very significant customer for volumes of green hydrogen. So for our own decarbonisation, we'll need to install around 2 to 2.5 gigawatts of new renewable generation. Now, the great thing about this strategy is that we just, by lucky happenstance, we produce iron ore and have comparative advantage in iron ore production in the Pilbara in exactly the same scale and resource intensity as we do in renewable production. So we've got amazing solar energy resource and also amazing wind resource out to the closer to the coast of Western Australia. So those coincident energy sources allow us to install that new generation and create the renewable energy that's needed, either to be decarbonising the stationary energy fleet with that renewable energy and storage, and to be creating the energy needed to charge batteries or produce the green hydrogen that will be needed to run the fuel cell or battery electric vehicles that currently produce the vast majority of our emissions. So of that 2 million tonnes, about 60% comes from the burning of diesel, and a business the size of ours burns about 600 million litres of diesel a year. So, that is both a moral decision on the behalf of the major shareholder of Fortescue. He owns 35% of the company, of the board, of the rest of the shareholders and of the management team, as well as basically an economic imperative. So, we know that renewables now are at a price which displace fossil fuels economically on a per unit basis, and happily co-locating all this iron ore production with great resource intensity is a great economic opportunity for us to both decarbonise and create shareholder value at the same time. We then want to take that fact that we've, by having to decarbonise by 2030, by having to go through all this technology challenges, and by having to create that renewable energy and green hydrogen at scale, if we've done that in a way that does keep us economically efficient and competitive, we will be actually in a position to sell that to third parties. And we also sit alongside a number of our competitors in the Pilbara, whether that's BHP or Rio Tinto, and obviously they would be looking, as they go through their decarbonisation journeys, for the same sorts of products that we're producing for our own operations. And we also believe that our customers for the iron ore very soon become very large customers for green hydrogen, for the reduction of our green iron ore to ultimately to green steel. Or it can go into any number of other value chains, and whether it be displacing diesel and large transportation fleets in Japan, whether it be blending in or replacing grey hydrogen, grey ammonia that's been made from fossil fuels into the food decarbonisation journey. And obviously many European manufacturers and owners of ammonia and fertiliser production are European based, so they have their own 2050 obligations to meet. So there are many uses for the green hydrogen, and we are a bit agnostic to what the carrier product for the green hydrogen will be, or the end use product. We're very much customer focused, but at the moment the whole green hydrogen industry is nascent in that it's neither supply nor demand constrained, and we're very excited about the engagement we've received so far with a number of potential very interesting and potential customers for this new industry and large volumes of green hydrogen from Australia.
Thank you so much for your input, and indeed amazing best case examples all the way from Australia, and not only, but following your examples and everything that you have listed, I just have one question. What do you think should be the mechanisms that are most important for companies to follow in order to efficiently implement and enhance their decarbonization and innovation processes? Thank you.
Look, I mean, the private sector is good at coming up with the solutions that are needed to meet regulatory or policy targets that are set for it. And some organisations like Fortescue will self-impose those and work towards them, but others need to be brought on that journey. And certainly in the early days of renewable energy, perhaps 20 years ago, there were very strong policy drivers to encourage the greater uptake of renewable energy into our electricity markets, and that was really to start the supply side effects of significant manufacturing economies of scale, and those economies of scale then ultimately brought down the cost of renewable energy equipment, which has allowed all of the economic benefits to both electricity systems and mining operators to now translate into this opportunity to decarbonise and to decarbonise electricity use as well as to decarbonise fuel use. So, we've got a sort of similar sort of situation now in the green hydrogen industry, where the thing that makes the green hydrogen, that splits the water into hydrogen and oxygen, the electrolyzers, is a bit like solar panels 10 years ago. They're a bit of a cottage industry, but we know that if we get enough volume in the manufacturing, they will come down significantly in cost. And there's a lot of work already going on in Europe about how to incentivise and draw through demand for those. So we're sort of actively watching the policy space, and we will be, I think it's going to be quite Europe-led. And obviously many of our customer countries, particularly Japan, also have quite strong policy drivers for the adaptation or usage of green hydrogen, and they'll probably be working with us as we seek to, get those supply signals in the supply chain for those procurement signals in the supply chain for the volume production of electrolysis.
Thank you so much. And indeed, it is great to see such an integrated joint work on behalf of the authorities, the private sector, and the communities with regards to your examples. Now we come to our last speaker of the panel today, Mr. David Archer, CEO at Savannah. Mr. Archer has a wide experience in the mining industry for over 30 years, with specific expertise in the development and operation of copper and gold projects. David has held executive and non-executive roles in a number of listed companies and has been very actively involved in the international resource industry. He was the Senior Independent Director of Anglo-Pacific Group from 2014 to 2019. And as I mentioned, currently holds the position of CEO at Savannah. Mr. Archer, you have the floor, please.
Right, thank you, and ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to be here today to talk to you about the application of green mining to the Mina de Brosso lithium project in northeast Portugal, and how it will help in the decarbonising of Europe. But first up, some context. Our world is based around the relationship of rights and responsibilities. This nexus is fundamental to the way we order our societies. In the context of climate change, we recognise that with the right of our families to live in a stable global climate that has historically allowed humanity to flourish, we have an associated responsibility to prevent runaway climate change. All of us, each and every one of us in this conference, including communities, and including the mineral production industry, has its own individual part to play with this. Equally, at a supranational, national and personal level, if we wish to opt into buying consumer items, whether it's mobile phones or electric vehicles, we cannot simply opt out of being responsible for the production and husbandry of the raw materials upon which they rely. The European Commission recognises this with its circular economy policies and its objective to introduce responsibility, resiliency and autonomy around the supply of vital battery raw materials, which will help Europe meet its climate change target of carbon neutrality by 2050. Offshoring of the production of minerals destined for European consumption to jurisdictions with inferior to non-existent labour laws, limited to minimal environmental controls, and governance-light regulation is tantamount to new resource colonialism. In our own case, with the development of Mina de Brosso in Portugal, we recognise both the opportunity and the very significant associated responsibility of developing the operation. We hope that we'll be able to set a new benchmark for a resource development in terms of adopting leading environmental and social initiatives. Mina de Brosso is designed to be an example of green and smart mining resource production in practice. More than 10% of the project's capital cost has been allocated to specific environmental initiatives to ensure the delivery of a responsible development strategy which is compatible with the territory by way of the promotion of the quality of the environment and the quality of life of local populations. In total, there are some 238 individual mitigation initiatives that we plan. We will adopt a highly integrated and multifaceted approach with an emphasis on the economy of use of energy, materials and water. The initiatives are numerous. For example, we'll be looking to power the project's processing operations with the extensive locally available hydro and wind renewable resources. We'll be looking to use sequential development of mining while undertaking progressive rehabilitation. In other words, restore as we develop. We'll be repurposing production areas at the end of the project's life to allow for pumped hydro activities and water storage for the benefit of local communities. We'll be looking to apply real-time monitoring of network-based sensors to allow stakeholders and regulators and the community to give them the information around water and air quality, noise, dust and other features via an app in real time. We'll be looking at developing a network project which will monitor vehicle movements and maximise fuel efficiencies through managed programs and automation. We'll be establishing ecological corridors. We'll be looking to optimise process design to ensure that we produce better quality products with less energy consumed and reduced emissions. We'll be using biodegradable reagents. There are a host of individual initiatives, including the construction of a bypass road to entirely avoid any project traffic moving through villages in the immediate area of our project. This means that local village livestock will continue to be able to amble down local village roads. Water is key. We'll be looking to recycle 85% of the water that will be employed in the project, and essentially the mill water process will be a sealed system. Today, we announced the adoption of an environmental and social management system, an ESMS, to aid implementation and maintenance of Savannah's corporate sustainability policy. It will be applied directly to Mina de Barroso, and the policy and the system is aligned with internationally recognised ESG standards, namely the requirements of the International Finance Corporation's performance standards on environmental and social sustainability, as well as the World Bank Group's environmental, health and safety, mining and general guidelines. At the same time, we're very conscious of what we can offer to local communities. It goes without saying that there will be jobs, 200 direct jobs, 600 indirect jobs. Assuming each job holder has 2 family members, then some 2,500 people in the region will directly benefit from Mina de Barroso. This will be transformative for the region and will introduce new vibrancy, younger people and new demand for the area's traditional, artisanal, agricultural products. Supplementing this, we will be offering a benefit sharing program, which will be matched with a good neighbour plan, which will help bring a series of great outcomes and opportunities to communities. The benefit sharing plan will involve the creation of a foundation to be endowed with funds from Savannah and from the mining activities that will be directed at worthy community, social and agricultural programs. The BSP will be designed to endure past the end of the project's life to provide ongoing support to the community by way of a permanent endowment. The Good Neighbour Plan is a framework of features that benefit the community from our presence. For example, the availability of emergency medical support to local villages, if required, and coordination with and support for the local fire services via the cooperative use of the project's infrastructure. We look forward to working with the community to develop community-owned companies to provide services such as rehabilitation capabilities to the project. Finally, at the end of the project's life, we're looking to hand the site over to the local council, which can then use the area for recreational or commercial purposes such as pumped hydro or tourism. In this way, we plan to leave a real legacy to the community of assets, prosperity and opportunity. In aggregate, Mina de Barroso will be an industry beacon that will showcase the very best new methods and techniques and will help to build a deep body of expertise that can be adopted by other raw material producers in Europe. Truly an example of Portugal leading the way for the industry in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And wow, so many commitments, so many measures already delivered. Just because we are close to the end, maybe just two short questions given your experience and so many commitments that you have just listed. One question: what would be your advice for the rest of the European mining sector, and not only European? What should be their main drivers for future innovation, and how can these initiatives be strengthened and empowered?
Yeah, my view is that communication is key. I know the first speaker sort of mentioned this, but I just feel that there is not a true understanding of the facts behind mineral production. In our case, for example, we completed our EIA, which is an extraordinarily extensive document and which deep dives really into every aspect of the mining operation. And what I think has to be is I think we've really got to establish a facts-based dialogue. I know that a facts-based dialogue is not particularly popular these days, but I believe that is the real way to communicate. We shouldn't be talking with slogans. We shouldn't be talking in hyperbole. We should be talking to the facts and sort of cooperatively sort of communicating this really very sort of vital message. There are some key elements which will mean a lot to Europeans, and I think the mining industry has a lot to offer.
Thank you. And maybe one last question to conclude our discussion today, taking into consideration the measures, the economic, social, energy, environmental, and climate change measures that you have previously mentioned. I will go back to the first question of the panel, and maybe you could also answer from the mining side. Do you think that the European fully sustainable and innovative mining industry has become a reality, or is it on its way to do so?
I think that's an interesting question. I mean, traditionally, Europe is seen to be a incredibly sort of challenging jurisdiction in which to develop new mines, and I think it's really lacked investment from the international mining industry as a result. So, I think that is very important. Europe is blessed with great mineral assets, and I believe that they can be developed in a responsible way that is entirely consistent with the interests of local communities and can bring prosperity and opportunity, and can really sort of coalesce with some of the key sort of policy challenges that Europe has at the moment, particularly international competitiveness and really sort of the need to sort of transition the European car manufacturing industry into the manufacture of electric vehicles. I mean, that is absolutely sort of vital to the sort of the economic condition of the European economy.
Thank you so much for your answers. Thank you, the rest of the panelists, for taking the time. Thank you, Mr. Waits, Mrs. Teresa Ponce de Leao, Mr. Robert Grant, and Mr. David Archer. And again, a big thank you to the organizers and all of you who took part in watching this panel on resilience, innovation, and sustainability. Thank you very much, and good luck with the rest of the works today.
The room will now be disinfected, and we will resume the session in a few minutes. Batteries are essential for storing energy from renewable sources. This way, it will be possible for Portugal to meet its decarbonization goals. In 2030, about 80% of electricity from renewable sources, and in 2050, 100%. In our next panel, Battery Strategic Value Chain, we will cover sustainable business models across the battery value chain, integrating a systemic approach and a life cycle perspective. I welcome the following speakers: Diego Pavilla, CEO of InnoEnergy; Emma Nerenheim, Chief Environmental Officer of Northvolt; and Paulo Ferreira, Professor and Group Leader of International Iberian Nanotechnology Laboratory. António Costa Silva, Professor at Instituto Superior Técnico, will moderate the debate.
So good morning to everybody. This is a panel dedicated on the battery strategic value chain. We have three distinguished speakers to address this item. We know that in 2017, the European Union launched the initiative, the European Battery Alliance. More than 440 entities, enterprises supported this initiative. This is a key initiative for the future. In the beginning of this year, all of us witnessed the huge dependence of the European automotive industry regarding the semiconductors and the microchips that are, most of them, produced in Asia. And we don't want that with the batteries, this will happen again. So we are moving to a battery-driven world, and the cluster of batteries is very important in order to ensure the future, especially the energy transition and the sustainability at the European economy. We will start our panel with a presentation by Diego Pavilla. Diego obtained his degree in electronics and automation from the Polytechnic University in Madrid. He created in 1988 the Knowledge Engineering Company, a startup dealing with industrial control system using artificial intelligence and neural networks. So Diego has a broad mind, and this is a crucial item for the technological development nowadays. He was also CEO of Atos Origin, and more recently, he is the CEO of KIC InnoEnergy, and he is following the European Battery Alliance. So please, Diego, we are enthusiastic to see what you have to say today.
Thank you, Antonio. So I have a small presentation. I don't know if somebody can share that on the screen. Or it should be me.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So in 5 minutes, I would like to drive you through the journey of the European Battery Alliance. As Antonio said, it was all launched in 2017. So I'm going to get 4 slides on the results, what we have achieved so far, and then 2 slides on what are the challenges going forward. And one of them, of course, is raw materials. So next slide, please. So that was launched in October 2017. You see who is really the soul and the sponsor of the whole movement, that is Vice President Šefčovič on the right side of the picture. And then you have Germany, France, and Poland as the first three countries that were supporting this ambition. And what was ambition? The ambition, you see that on the right side of the screen, is to create a new business in Europe worth 250 billion euros every year by 2025. Just to put that in the context, that's the size of the Danish economy. So it's to create a new Denmark worth of GDP in Europe by 2025. So it's massive. In terms of jobs that will drive between 3 and 4 million jobs. So that was ambition that we put ourselves in 2017. So let's see at the results. Next, please. You see on the top side of the slide, right side, the blue bar is the electric vehicles sold in each one of the economies, Europe, China, US, blah, blah, in 2020, and the gray bar in 2019. So you see that the massive progress has been done in Europe. So that we have almost tripled the number of EVs sold in 2020 compared to 2019. And we have overtaken China, where the progress in China has pretty small. And also I can compare to USA, the third two bars, where the USA has basically is a fourth of our volumes of EVs sold and has made no progress. So that's a key fact about the progress of electromobility in Europe. And the second chart is about how many investments have been captured by Europe compared to China. And you see that in 2019 and 2020, we have captured 60 billion each year in Europe. That is 3 times as much as China. So starting from 2017, very behind Asia, now we are fast following and catching up. Next slide. This map is today's 70 plus industrial projects that are driving growth and jobs in Europe. As you can see, is most countries have got some of those industrial projects. And this map was back in 2017, only 2 dots. So in 3.5 years, we have populated with heavy capex intensive industrial projects all the European continent across all the value chain. Next one, please. And this has been done, as Antonio was saying, thanks to creating a fit-for-purpose ecosystem, where the blue segment is all the industries, the big guys and the small guys. The orange segment is the research centers and academia and associations. And the green segment on the bottom part is the private money, investors. I mean, to create the European Battery Alliance and all the industrial value chain requires massive amount of money. The good news is that both the public and private investors are crowding in. So it has been a success story from all the stakeholders, of course, led by the Commission after 3.5 years. Next one, please. And maybe this one is even more relevant. So in December last year, all the stakeholders I just described in the previous slide, we together created the regulation, the battery regulation, that basically describes what is the life cycle that any battery that's going to be sold, produced and sold in Europe has to fulfill. And there are 3 keywords. Keyword traceability, that is very important because today is about green mining, this conference. Sustainability, the second keyword, and circularity is about recycling the battery at the end of the life. I can state, since I'm not commissioned, I can say that freely, that this regulation has set a stick in the ground vis-à-vis the other economies of the world, namely the US and Asia, in terms of how to manage the life cycle of the batteries. It's putting Europe like 10 years ahead of everybody else. Next slide, please. So we've just covered what we have done, and it has been a success, but we have to keep on going and accelerate it even more. So in my 2 slides, I'm addressing the gaps, what needs to be filled to be able to serve the demand that's going to happen in Europe by 2025. And you see here across all the value chains, mimicked by a battery symbol, the green is the already existing production capacity in all the steps of the value chain. The orange is the committed one, and the blue is the gap between what we need by 2025 and what today is the pipeline of industrial projects. And you see that the gaps are considerable, but we have, as far as energy and EBA, we are not too much concerned, except for upstream raw materials, so mining and processing, and skills, and citizen involvement. And why? Because in raw materials, as David has just shared in the previous session, between the day you decided to start a mine and you extract the lithium, for example, and convert it into lithium hydroxide for a battery grade, it takes 7 years. And today we're in 2021. So there's a long lead time between decision of investment and production. And we want to be resilient and autonomous vis-à-vis the rest of the world as much as possible. So this for us is one of the key challenges. The second one is the skills. Skills, it also takes time to create the skills and competencies to feed the different industrial processes and companies along the value chain. A number, please retain this, we need 800,000 new skilled workers across the value chain in the next 3 years. 800,000, that's massive. Final slide, please. So if I do a deep dive into the raw materials and upstream, it's a piece of news that this audience is the first where we're pitching this. So this summer, we're launching a green fund for the scoping, PFS and DFS parts of any mining and processing industrial project. Because we believe, as we said, that this is one of the risky areas of being fully successful in Europe. And today, when you open a mine, there are 3 phases before the project finance comes on board, the debt guys. And those 3 phases, scoping, PFS and DFS, today they are going too slow. So we decided already 1 year ago to start maneuvering to create a fund that will accelerate those phases. The fund ambition is around $250 million to be launched again this summer, and to create the mining projects, the green mining projects in Europe, in the key materials, mainly lithium and manganese, where Europe can be totally self-sufficient, a bit of cobalt up in Scandinavia, nickel, and aluminium and graphite. Again, to secure the resilience of the European battery value chain. But I guess there will be more questions afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Diego, for your very interesting presentation. I think this is an example where an European Union initiative is bringing some results. It's quite impressive that in 2019 we attracted 3 times more investment than China. We have today 70 industrial projects that are running. As you have clearly demonstrated, there are some huge gaps in terms of skills, access to materials, and other components of the value chain. And when we look to that, I would like that you discuss a little bit from your point of view, what are the main challenges and obstacles that we have today to achieve these goals?
For me, Antonio, there are 5. First, to adopt the battery regulation as soon as possible without diminishing the current ambitions. I think that what the industry and the Commission has created is paramount, is again a landmark. So the first request is for the Member States and the Parliament and the Commission to very quickly adopt the regulation, because that gives certainty to industry, to investors. My second ask of the 5 would be about societal preparation. David covered it. It's about being pedagogic and communicating a lot, because to do mining and processing, by default, people think about it's dirty. Well, it's not dirty. It's just to be managed. So we need a lot of pedagogy and communication with the locals and with the politicians, so they understand that this is not only business, but is also good for the environment. Number 3 is permitting processes. Again, the 7 years from decision to implementation operation is long. So we don't ask for having different permitting process, but to fast track them. So to do them as soon as possible within the regulations. Number 4 is to crowd in investors. As I said, we see there a lack. That's why we are launching the EBA Green Fund to accelerate the risky phases of any mining and processing. And the last one is, is our sweet spot, is that we need innovators along the way. Today, the way lithium is processed around the world is not up to the standards that we in Europe want. And we need to develop new processing that are environmentally friendly and sustainable. We need the innovators of the world to make that happen. And then Europe will not only become a sustainable, resilient upstream value chain, but will also be able to export technologies elsewhere to make the world greener.
Okay, thank you.
Over to you.
Thank you, Diego, for your very interesting five points. I think we will take them for the future discussion. And it is interesting what you mentioned about mining and the access to the materials, because we are here in Lisbon in the Centro Cultural of Belém, and we have outside just a demonstration against the mining initiatives in the country related to lithium. So I think the communication with the local communities, the discussion of these issues, the demonstration that there is a clear trade-off between the access of materials and, for instance, the energy transition, the electrification of the economy is something we have to debate in our societies. But I profit this opportunity to give the floor or the screen to Emma Neranheim. Emma, we are very, very proud that Emma joined us. She is the Chief Environmental Officer at Northvolt. She started with a PhD in the area of industrial waste and even the waste related to water consumption. She developed several research and development projects across the board. She's also a professor in terms of environmental monitoring and environmental systems. And today she plays the role of Chief Environmental Officer at Northvolt, one of the European companies that is developing the business across this issue. And I think she will focus on the sustainability of the business model, and we need also to discuss that in order to respond to the European regulation regarding the battery supply chain. Please, Emma, the screen is yours. We are not listing you.
Sorry.
Okay,
Hi,
okay.
sorry for being muted. I'm going to start with sharing my presentations. So I hope that it's fine that I share this from my own computer. And I hope you can all see it. So yes, hello, my name is Emma Neranheim, and I represent Northvolt today. It's a great honor to meet you all in one of the most important topics that we have ahead of us and that we are working with very heavily every day, which is raw materials, sustainability, and how we build a strong supply chain for our coming big industries in Europe. Northvolt came into play on this market about 4+ years ago. We see that as a very long time now, but by then you should remember that Europe was heavily behind. We were struggling to find a good way to solve the battery manufacturing within Europe. We were struggling with issues like long supply chains, complex supply chains, bringing a lot of risk and insecurity into the entire electrification, basically. At the same time, we knew that if we don't do anything, it's going to be hard for Europe to deliver on the Paris Agreement. It's a case where we, in Europe, as in the rest of the world, have developed a lot of ideas and technologies for renewable energy. We would like to supply this energy to the electricity grid worldwide, of course. There are many calculations on that the solar energy could easily supply the entire power need for this planet. It's a matter of how to transmit, distribute, and store. And if we do not do anything about this, of course, it's going to be problematic to utilize this renewable energy within Europe. And the same thing with the vehicle industry, of course. And battery is part of the solution. It's a major part of that solution, and it comes with a lot of transitions on the mining sector, as well as on the circularity areas, as we already touched upon. Interestingly, since we started, the momentum has increased enormously. Today, it's not a question of how, it's not even a question on when. It's happening here and now, and we will talk about that in the panel, I know, but we just want to give an acknowledgement to the entire EU for being so extremely committed, and not only countries, but also companies have really stepped up and shown that now that there is a trustworthy solution for the sustainability within the supply chain, as well as becoming carbon free. More and more companies are committed to take the full step towards electrification in the vehicle industry. And that, I think, is one of the most important things that we are doing on this planet right now. And what are Northvolt committed to do, and what do we do on a day-to-day basis? Well, we know that it can be questioned whether batteries are fully sustainable. Producing batteries requires raw materials with a lot of water, land, resources, and so on, that brings carbon footprint, but also other footprints of all the 16 impact factors that are embedded in a typical life cycle assessment. If we compare, you can find batteries that are delivered on the market within Europe today that have up to 175 or even up to 180 kilos per kilowatt hour of carbon footprint. And Northvolt has set the target to be at 10 2030. And how can we get there? It's all about making sure that we go to low carbon electricity grids, making sure that we have a direct metering on that, so that it's just not just greenwashing, making sure that we include circularity. Circularity meaning of bringing the batteries back as close as possible, and making new raw materials, making sure that our batteries stay on the market for as long as possible within the vehicle, and so on and so forth. We are also committed to working with supply chain and to supporting a strong development on the raw material market, taking carbon footprint primarily into consideration. And this is something that we are working very hard on. And I think it's very interesting to see that even globally, there is a very strong interest of being competitive, not only on price, not only on availability, but also on carbon neutrality, to be part of the European development. So it's clearly seen as one of the most important markets for these kind of materials. The strong advantage of Northvolt that I also want to highlight, that we have ahead of basically any other battery manufacturer, is that we are very strongly vertically integrated upstream. And what does this mean? This means that a normal battery manufacturer would buy the raw materials from an intermediate player that produces active material. So the cathode material, nickel, cobalt, and manganese, would already be produced. And this creates a whole lot of challenges in terms of doing due diligence and audits on the full supply chain. The supply chain becomes more complex and hard to control. We are buying from the miners themselves, with a refinery connected to the mine. So that's a strong difference for Northvolt. Producing our own active material, also under a carbon neutral electricity grid. And this also means that when we go into our raw material strategy, this is where we have all the footprint. So since we are that virtually integrated, since we have 100% renewable energy into our factory, it means that there is really very little to take on our own production. It's also very little to take in terms of saving carbon footprint on the active material production. And this in its turn means that we have to turn to the raw material producers for cutting the footprint. And in doing that, we have to turn to a very strong raw material strategy. We have already spent a lot of time on the NMC, so the nickel and the cobalt and manganese. We also have spent a lot of time in the recycling. So when it comes to the nickel, cobalt, manganese, the lithium and the graphite that we can recycle, the footprint is already very good. And we have a target to be fully recycled with 50% recycled materials by 2030. And then on the other 50%, we have some things that we still have to and want to work on. We already, as I said, spend a lot of time on the NMC mix and the sulfates there. But we need also to focus a little bit more on lithium, which is also very interesting in this context. And we also need to spend some time on the graphite. We have a strong dependency globally when it comes to these materials that is from Asia. And I think that this is something that we also need to discuss. Otherwise, we are building footprint there that comes into play in our battery manufacturing, and that might be hard for us to control over time. So very interesting for us to look at a European supply chain for those materials and for bringing partnerships into Europe here. With that said, thank you for your attention, and I'm really looking forward to the panel discussion later.
Okay, Emma. Thank you very much for your very interesting presentation. I think when we produce batteries today, we cannot repeat the patterns of the past in terms of the impact on the environment. And you have showed that Northvolt, you are developing all this system with 75% lower emissions when you compare with your global peers. And I think this is a huge step forward. But as you know, we have, in terms of the European Union, the regulation for the batteries. And for this regulation, they pay a lot of attention to the sustainability, to the circularity of the materials. And I would like to know from your side, in terms of Northvolt, and even in terms of the European industry, how do you place yourselves in terms of this European regulation? You are addressing all the key issues, or there are some other steps that need to be developed forward?
I mean, we are very grateful for the European Commission taking this so seriously. We have seen the draft of the regulation, and we are very happy to read it. We think that anyone that places a battery on the European market should have to declare the carbon footprint. We also think that anyone that places a battery on the European market should be able to declare the recycling content. And I think that this should be a competitive advantage for anyone that manages their circularity together with their customers and the OEMs. I think also that it's very important to understand that the quality of the material or data that goes into this will be important going forward. So making sure that we can really trace and that we can really have a full content declaration of the batteries. And I think that goes for basically everything that we places on the market in this new industry that is growing. I think that's also important. It should be easy to understand how to recycle the materials. And then all in all, I think it's a very positive development. I think that we have to challenge ourselves, and I think that we should not ease in the beginning, but because then we might build ourselves into a complex structure that is too costly to change as we go. So I'm really grateful, and I really encourage the European Commission to continue the work on the regulation in the direction that is already being put out.
Okay. Thank you, Emma, for your comments. We can move to the next speaker. Is Paulo Ferreira. Paulo is a professor in the Department of Mechanical Engineering in the IST, in the University of Lisbon. He is also a group leader in the nanotechnology lab that is located in Braga, in the north of Portugal. This is the Iberian Nanotechnology Laboratory. Paulo has a very impressive career because he took his PhD in material science and engineering from the University of Illinois in the United States. He has done a postdoctoral work at the MIT. He is today also professor in the University of Texas in Austin. He is one of the most remarkable researchers that we have in Portugal in this field of nanotechnologies. And myself, I believe that nanotechnologies can play a huge role in terms of the future, responding to several of the main issues regarding the production of new materials, new devices, and also helping in the energy industry, in the electronics industry, electrical engineering, with a lot of applications that we can devise from this research. So please, Paulo, the screen is yours.
Okay, I guess you can listen to me.
Yes, it's okay.
Yeah. So first of all, I would like to say good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for the invitation. Let me start by saying a few words about INL. It stands for International Iberian Nanotechnology Laboratory. That's an intergovernmental organization currently funded by Portugal and Spain, and is focused on nanotechnology, and is located in Braga, in Portugal, about 50 kilometers from Porto. We are about 400 people, including 180 PhDs, which work in a cross-disciplinary environment, and which also have as a support a very nice infrastructure, both in terms of nano fabrication, a clean room, as well as a characterization lab, an advanced characterization lab centered on microscopy, as well as photonics lab. The way the research is subdivided, INL, is through the existence of clusters. We have a cluster on advanced materials and computing, another one on food, one on precise personalized health tech, on smart digital nanosystems, another one on sustainable environment, and of course, one in clean energy. And that's actually the one I coordinate. And we have a mission for this cluster, which is to develop solutions for low carbon renewables and recyclable energy technologies that incorporate nanomaterials and micro nanofabrication to enhance the performance, the cost effectiveness, sustainability, and stability of applications. So more specifically, in the case of the batteries, we are interested in the storage for renewable electricity and sustainability. That's a challenge. And there's a solution, the batteries are a way to go. In particular, in the case of batteries, we focus on, of course, lithium-based batteries. Another area which is interesting is the micro batteries. This is for high throughput screening and testing, but also for the consumer electronics market. And then lastly, post-lithium energy storage systems. This is, of course, without the presence of lithium, like sodium, as an example. Now, you maybe wonder, given the size of the batteries, how would the 10 nanotechnology would play a role? Well, I mean, if you look around you, everything you see is made of these ingredient basics of life, which we call atoms and molecules. And in fact, across the value chain of batteries, being in refinement or production of active materials or cells, the mechanism by which these materials operate is actually happens at the nanoscale. So the first aspect is that really to push this technology forward, we really need to continue to do fundamental research and try to understand the mechanisms of these materials at these levels. So that's the only way we can actually push technology forward. The second aspect, as you mentioned, actually is he provides the capability for developing new materials. And this is going to be, of course, critical. I compare a bit what happened with, for example, chip technology for computers, and here's basically the same thing. We want better materials with better performance, and then nanotechnology can play a role. And finally, a last aspect that maybe is less discussed, but where nanotechnology is really key, is for the development of sensors. And these sensors are going to be very critical across the value chain. We are talking about, for example, in terms of mining, for monitoring water quality, air quality, the soil. We are talking about maybe then across the value chain, for example, for if they are light enough to be introduced in the cells, and then of course in the pack. So we can monitor in real time the performance of these batteries, which are of course very important. And then of course, at the end of the process in the recycling, these sensors are going to be very critical. So in summary, I think this nanotechnology is going to be key for the establishment of this value chain in the case of batteries.
Okay, Paulo. Paulo, thank you very much for your presentation and the clues that you left to develop the application of nanotechnologies in the future. I found very interesting the relationship with the sensors, because sensors can change the way we produce even energy, the distribution of energy, the smartness of all the systems. And we are witnessing today the application of the sensors, providing more information and changing completely the way and the sustainability of our business models. So from your research, the application of these sensors, as you mentioned, in terms of the battery value chain, even in terms of the mining projects related to the acquisition of these lithium, cobalt, and other materials, can improve the sustainability of this system? Do you know any application of the sensors or the nano products in this battery value chain today?
Sure. So as I mentioned, I mean, first in the mining case, this is going to be critical for the site, but also for the adjacent areas, for the populations of the communities. So it's critical to be able to monitor the air quality, and also the water quality. And in the case of the water, not only monitoring, but actually treat the water. So that's actually rather important, and of course the soils as well. So that's, I think, to make the system a green mining, let's say, this sensor, I think, going to be very important. Then more on the production of cells and packs, if we can really introduce these sensors on a cell, basically as the packs are built by many cells, we can actually almost monitor in real time these cells, and we know what's actually going on with the pack. This is, of course, very important to manage the battery and actually have a better control of these processes. And then, of course, recycling is very important. I think Emma mentioned a little bit like that. It's critical to recover, lithium, cobalt, nickel, manganese. In this case, nanotechnology also through, for example, porous materials, they can sieve these products, and so to recover that, because of course then we can extend the lifetime of the mines if we can recover those. So that, I think that's going to be important for this kind of circular economy, and also for green mining as well.
Thank you. We have more or less five minutes to complete our panel, so I will address some specific questions to each one of you. So Diego, from the 5 points that you listened, that we need strong developments in the future, you mentioned access to the materials, to the mining, and we have several programs in Europe, starting in Portugal, with the development of this project. And after you connected also this with the licensing process and the 7 years that in average it takes in Europe. These two issues cannot affect strongly the competitiveness of the European industries regarding the development of battery supply chain?
So totally, Antonio, your point is very sensitive. Yesterday, Roskilde, that is one of the key guys around the world about raw materials, for the needs for Europe, they published a report where basically they said, hey, Europe is gonna supply everything, source everything from outside Europe. And it's a very good report, but again, it's taking out the indigenous supply that we can do in Europe for ourselves. Let's remember that today we import 300 billion euros worth of oil and gas just to power our economy in Europe. 300 billion euros. Aren't we to be stupid if we just substitute the dependency of oil and gas by dependency of raw materials? So for me, the pedagogy, Antonio, that you said before, the convincing everybody that this is good for the environment, is good for business, good for employment, is key. And we should not substitute the dependency from another dependency.
Okay, I think your comment is very important, Diego, and my fear is that in Europe we have a very romantic view about our future. We would like to develop a future without access to these raw materials. So we are building a technological advanced civilization and disregarding these issues. And I think it's very important to address this, to communicate with the people. And I think the development of these projects can create competitiveness for Europe. These are engines of growth for the future. But this is related also with the question that I have for Emma, because I was looking in terms of the waste that we generate in Europe, and my last estimate is around 4 billion tons per year that we generate in terms of waste. So the circular economy here can play a role, even in terms of access to these raw materials. And if we treat this waste, these residuals, maybe we can recover around, my estimation is between 25 to 30%, 30, of the materials that we need. This is something that we have to progress. What is the status in Europe? Because treating the waste is something that we have to exploit in order to recover some of these materials that are deeply needed for the battery supply chain.
Yes, sorry.
Okay,
this is
we are
what
listening.
This is one of the fundamental differences between a combustion engine dominating market and an EV market. So the battery has elements. Elements can by definition be recycled. They go back to their virgin form in the process, and then they can be used again and again countless times. So that's the main difference, just to be clear on that. And I think that this is something that has a very strong focus right now. We see a very clear interest. We understand that the end customer will know and how to interpret recycling rates in the batteries by 2025, 2030, when the market is maturing. And we clearly see that this is a strong commitment from the car makers in Europe right now. I also then want to point out that it's very important for us to keep the control on these materials. So understanding how to set it up and making sure that we have a very strong commitment from the distributed markets. So not only from the source of the car, the OEM factories, but also out there when the car has reached its sort of maybe 5th or 6th owner. And this is the main challenge, not to lose it, not to lose the materials out from Europe at that time, and so on. And I think that that's where we can really join hands. And when we talk about the yield of a recycling line, we have a very high recycling yield. The recycling yield is far above 90% already now. For most processes, like ours, it's far above 95%. And this means that if we have losses in the material, it's from the collection. So we need to deal with that, and we need to make sure that we have a short path as possible back from the market to the recyclers, to the battery manufacturers, so that each and every element returns and becomes a new battery at the end of life.
Okay, thank you, Emma, for your response. One last question to Paulo. One of the reasons why today we have still the domination of oil and gas in the world energy metrics is related with the fact that we can store oil and gas and consume when we want. We cannot do this with electricity at the grid scale. Do you think that the qualities of the nanomaterials in terms of the lightness, resistance, smartness can bring a role in the future in finding more advanced systems for the storage of energy, namely with the flow batteries and other concepts?
Yeah, for sure. So I think actually one of the interesting things in Portugal is just we have a lot of renewables. So that's actually in terms of stationary applications, that's the batteries are also actually very important in that respect. So we should always divide the batteries for stationary and mobile. And of course, they have different, let's say, specifications in somehow. But I think what we need is this, if you look at the generations of batteries, 3B, 4, and 5. So we need really this better performance, high durability, cyclability, stability, chemical stability, and of course, lower costs. I think we are going in the right way. I mean, there's been significant improvements in terms of materials, both for the anode and the cathode, in terms of increasing capacity. There are still some issues with anodes, particularly volume expansion, which is difficult to deal with. And then, of course, an important aspect is this transition from the liquid batteries to solid state. This is still, and there are different types, ceramic and polymeric, and that's kind of it's going to be the next phase. This will, of course, improve things a lot, besides flammability, but also in terms of durability and performance. And lastly, the cost. I mean, just to give you an idea, the cost of lithium-ion batteries has gone down by about 90% for the last 10 years. So this is good news. We are now, I believe, about 140 or so. And so I think the predictions by 2025 is that we will be at the point where the EVs are going to be competitive from economic standpoint. So I think, again, I'm almost, it almost reminds me of this Moore's law that happened in the microelectronic industry, that the goal of the industry was basically making smaller devices and higher speeds and higher performance for better computers. I think we need something here similar. So we need these batteries, keep increasing capacity and also and performance, but of course lower the costs. And then it will be almost a point of no return that I think the EVs will dominate the market. Of course, for also stationary applications. Right now, also the batteries, they cannot store a lot, but these I think are going to be quite useful in terms of both connecting to the renewables. Also, I think it gives you less dependence, of course, of the fossil fuels, less extension from the grid, because you can now have remote areas with renewables and storage. And of course, you can put all these together, actually. The EVs that, for example, during peak times, which may be lunch and dinner, usually the vehicles are standing by. And so if they are connected to the grid, you can have this kind of interaction between the stationary renewables and the EVs. So that's, I think, it's going to be an important role. But the bottom line is definitely, as I said, you need to keep pushing the performance of these materials, and of course lowering the costs. That's what is going to make it feasible in the future.
Paulo, thank you very much. Thank you, Paulo, Emma, and Diego, for this very interesting panel. Thank you very much. We will close now. Thank you.
Now, on behalf of Commissioner Thierry Breton, the Director for Mobility and Energy Intensive Industries of the European Commission, Joaquim Nunes de Almeida, has the floor.
Good afternoon, boa tarde a todos. Just a few words in Portuguese, which is irresistible in the circumstances. Muito obrigado por terem aceito que eu representasse o Comissário Breton nesta sessão de fecho desta conferência.
This is an extremely important conference, and I'm here to talk on behalf of the Commissioner Thierry Breton. I am the Director for Mobility and Energy Intensive Industries of the European Commission, as you've heard from the voice of since the 15th of March, and I will continue in English.
we very much welcome the Portuguese presidency's initiative to organize a conference specifically dedicated to green, sustainable mining. We set out to be the world's first climate neutral continent by 2050 and to make our EU economy circular and digitized. For Europe's ambition to deliver the Green Deal, access to resources is a matter of strategic security. A secure supply of raw materials and critical raw materials in particular is a vital prerequisite for clean technologies and for digital, space and defense applications. It enables the EU industry to be the world's climate frontrunner and to remain strong and competitive at a global scale. Disruptions caused by the crisis we're going through, showed us that the EU has strategic dependencies which render it vulnerable unless properly addressed. The industrial strategy update adopted today contains an analysis of these strategic dependencies, and raw materials is one of the areas where we urgently need to increase EU resilience. This requires action on 3 strategic fronts. We must increase circularity, boost domestic sourcing, and diversify supply through strategic partnerships with reliable, resource-rich third countries. Coming to the topic of this conference, the question we must ask ourselves is green mining possible? The Commission has embraced a clear message from EU citizens. We must stop climate change and protect the environment. This requires a real shift in mindset and changes in many areas. And one of the key questions to consider is whether our consumption patterns are sustainable. We must keep our resource consumption within planetary boundaries, reuse, repair, recycle where we can. Where we do need primary raw materials, we must only go for sustainable projects that make a real effort to reduce environmental impacts and that involve the communities concerned in a really inclusive way. We must show that we can source raw materials responsibly and sustainably in Europe and from countries outside Europe. For mining activities, it is especially important that there is a constructive dialogue with civil society organizations to address the legitimate concerns about potential effects on the environment or the well-being of the local population. This is why the Commission will organize a dedicated roundtable on environmentally and socially sustainable raw materials mining by July this year. Member states play a crucial role in ensuring that mining is carried out in a sustainable way. They have the competence to grant mining permits in accordance with the existing EU, national and regional legislation. And the correct application and enforcement of EU environmental law is crucial in this area. The recently developed EU principles for sustainable raw materials can help foster an integrated, aligned approach to sustainable extraction and processing in the EU. Listening to experiences with resilience, innovation, and sustainability, it is evident that innovation plays a vital role. Our raw materials topics under Horizon Europe will fund innovative technologies and solutions that are environmentally friendly, circular, and digital. It is clear that the European Battery Alliance is doing crucial and very successful work to build a strong and resilient battery value chain in Europe. And I would like to thank Portugal for its active engagement in the Alliance and for underlining the importance of sustainable, responsible mining. We look forward to working together with the Portuguese presidency and to Portugal as a member state on this important topic as from now. Mais uma vez, obrigado. Agradeço mais uma vez ao Governo Português, ao Sr. Secretário.
I would like to thank again the Minister and the Secretary of State for organizing this, and thank you so much for organizing this conference, and a very good afternoon.
Thank you for your attention.
To close the conference, Green Mining, the Deputy Minister and Secretary of State for Energy, João Galamba, will take the floor.
Colleagues of the Portuguese government, Vice President Šefčovič, distinguished hosts and guests. It is my great pleasure and honor to hear the outcomes of this important conference on green mining under the Portuguese presidency of the Council of the European Union. I would like to thank all representatives of governments, namely Finland, Spain, and Indonesia, for their participation. Also, I would like to thank all representatives of the European Commission, researchers, national and international experts, the representatives of the mining industry, and other stakeholders who took part in this conference. Your participation and testimony to this high-level conference has been extremely valuable. I'm very pleased to have heard the fruitful discussion during this morning, with the contribution of the mining industry responsible for decarbonization and the testimony of examples of resilience and innovation in the national and international economies. While holding the presidency of the Council of the European Union, Portugal is committed to stimulate the opportunities arising from the necessary energy transition. With ambitious national plans that seek to reduce carbon emissions in the coming decades, we are witnessing a paradigm shift towards solutions for a possible replacement of the current global dependence on fossil fuels. The path to a carbon-neutral economy requires joint action in several strategic areas, with the mining sector as a great purveyor of raw materials being at the center of all clean and digital technologies we need to face the challenges put forth by climate change. Primary raw materials are at the beginning of every industry life supply chain and form a strong industrial base, producing a broad range of goods and applications used in everyday life and modern technologies. Raw materials are essential for the development of the world's economy and modern life. Thus, they are not a vestige of the past, but an inevitable part of the future. Our shared challenge is therefore to improve the full value chain sustainability, combining the extraction and refining capacities for raw materials with high environmental and social sustainability standards, to bring added value by associating with manufacturing industries. European production standards and practices must be valued and spearhead the transition into greener, more sustainable mining practices. Batteries are an important factor in the transition to climate neutrality, and sustainable mining is a precondition for the clean battery value chain. Portugal, with a clear and strong commitment to carbon neutrality, intends on promoting the production and use of high-performance batteries and establish sustainability references in the full value chain through a set of principles for social mining sector and for a mining sector that is social and environmentally sustainable. Essential raw material policies at the European level, while simultaneously zeroing in on highly efficient recycling processes and technologies, aiming at maximum recovery of batteries and its components, allowing for the reduction of the EU's dependence on raw materials and the establishment of a full circular economy in Europe. With this approach as a guidance, Portugal intends on contributing to the definition of a set of principles and standards for a socially and environmentally responsible and sustainable mining sector. At the national level, our new mining legislation, establishing green mining principles, is committed to setting standards for clean and competitive battery production. And this is an important contribution in this direction, where raw materials, environmental sustainability, and decarbonization can work hand in hand. The commitment to sustainability can enable us to achieve our climate and environmental goals while promoting the development of our economy. Environmental consciousness is changing the status quo in order to ensure mining and critical raw materials are compliant with the EU Green Deal and climate goals. It can never be interpreted as a denial of the resources needed for the energy, digital, and clean transitions, nor their demand. Those who sharply oppose the steps we all need to take towards a more sustainable future are the allies to maintaining unsustainable practices of the present and past. This is probably the biggest irony of all of those that oppose mining. The stance is not to oppose mining because mining is a precondition to human life. The position can thus be and only be the defense of more sustainable mining, never the abolition of all mines. The abolition of all mines will imply the abolition of life, because there is no life without mines and raw materials. It is a huge challenge, but is a challenge that we cannot escape. It is thus possible to transform national economies towards sustainable development based on a democratic and fair model, which in turn promotes civilizational progress, technological advancement, job creation and prosperity, wealth creation, territorial cohesion, together with the preservation of natural resources. In today's event, 4 sessions were organized focusing on national approaches, opportunities and challenges, and the importance of mineral resources for the energy transition. Examples of the high sustainability of current mining projects and the commitment and contribution of companies to decarbonization, and sustainable business models across the battery value chain by integrating a systemic approach and a life cycle perspective. During the opening address, we heard from Vice President of the European Commission, Mr. Mauro Sefcovic, who highlighted the tenacity of the Portuguese presidency in wanting to achieve a general approach to the battery regulation, which could mark a crucial turning point in the sustainable development of the battery value chain at the European level, with a central role in the green agenda. Vice President Sefcovic also mentioned the large reserves of lithium in Europe, which makes Portugal a strategic partner. Many jobs already depend on this lithium value chain, but many advances are yet to be made in the prospection of this material, of this mineral. Clean and digital technologies are heavily dependent on critical raw materials, and green and digital transitions will lead to a drastic increase in European demand for certain critical raw materials by 2050. Great importance was given to promote responsible mining practices for mining and to build trust among the population about the high standards and requirements necessary for today's responsible and sustainable mining activities. Regarding national approaches, we've heard of the key role of policies and the commitment to answer the challenges posed by sustainability. On opportunities and challenges, trends are on achieving good levels of performance in the mining sector to increase the acceptance of the sector by the public and society in general. It is essential to promote ethical standards at the social and environmental level and always comply with existing regulations and operate safely inside and outside of the mine. The potential of mineral resources in Portugal to support the energy transition was again highlighted. The session on resilience, innovation and sustainability mentioned the need to align principles of environmental and social aspects involving local communities. Right policies are key to public acceptance. One of the key elements of any modern mine, it's what is called the social license, which is the general acceptability of the local population towards this activity. Information communication is thus key. We all have a role to embrace in the society, and we are committed to the responsible exploitation of mineral resources in all its aspects. From the batteries value chain, it was mentioned that Europe has picked up and surpassed China in investment capture and electric vehicles sold. However, there is still work to be done in building up the resilience and sustainability of the European battery value chain. From a life cycle perspective, the highlights presented by our panelists regarding our innovation and circularity are key to reduce the carbon footprint of the battery value chain. Were very enlightening. Ladies and gentlemen, to finalize, we hope that this event has provided updated information, facilitated a fruitful discussion, and that you appreciated the opportunity to learn from all national and international participants that share their vision. And we must remember that the challenge is not to fight mines, but to fight so that mines become sustainable and acceptable. Our goal can never be zero impacts, because human life in the planet implies impacts. We always have to minimize impacts and guarantee a compromise between different but important values. that is our task. It was one of the rules of this conference, and we hope that we contributed to this result. Thank you very much for joining us. Have a good day.
We will now conclude the conference Green Mining. We wish you all a good afternoon. Thank you for watching.